Good morning. Welcome to another episode here. Today is November 23rd, and so this is the actual week of Thanksgiving here, and we're just rolling right along. So, hopefully, you've had an excellent week and have an amazing week coming up here. And Thanksgiving, it's interesting because I always start thinking about like, almost like a week before Thanksgiving, like, "Okay, how do I plan to not overeat that day?" I've had some pretty bad Thanksgiving where I definitely overate and regretted it afterwards and all, but I've been doing pretty good the past few years, though, where I haven't done as bad, but there's been definitely some moments, though, where I wasn't quite the smartest, but yeah, but hopefully you all have an amazing time this week and, spend with friends and family or however you celebrate. Uh, we'll be we'll be meeting up with some family and all, and I'm sure there'll be some good food and all. Although we're not hosting this year, so we're just kind of more taking along some food, I believe, and just enjoying just the day. Um, but yeah, let's see. So with this episode here, I feel it's going to be another chunky one. Just have some modern gaming stuff that I was wanting to discuss, and then also with 1995, there's several things that happened, so that might take a good chunk of time here. And also, if you, for whatever reason, are actually listening to this, and I'm not just talking here to myself, then hope, just feel free to sit back, relax, grab a drink, and let's talk some gaming news along, and then eventually reminisce on the year of 1995. So, with let me see here. Okay, so added a few new games. So we'll start off here with Relay of Gaming first, and so I did add a few new games here. So we're up to 1,552 on my list here. So let's just get cracking and see what the first one brings here. 454. That is Final Fight 3. Okay. All right, let's go with the next one. 215. Oh, perfect timing too, since we're talking about 1995. And this one I'm going to have a field day with. Chrono Trigger. That is excellent. All right, and let's go with the last one here. 1,447. That is going to be Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Alrighty. Okay, interesting little selection there. So, two games that originally came out on the Super Nintendo and a spin-off on a popular PlayStation series for the PlayStation 4. So, okay. So, Final Fight 3. It was actually fairly recently that I beat this game. Well, somewhat recently, maybe like about 2 years ago or so. And so, as I was just been kind of going through my little project here that started in 2020 or so when COVID hit. So again, I just started getting a lot of different emulation devices and all, and sort of started amassing a collection of games that is anything that I could find that was sold by on retail that I was trying to get. I'm just kind of filling in the gaps of a lot of games I was missing, along with a lot of the different games that all these emulation devices would come with and all that, along with just other let's just say game files that I've had throughout the years and all. And so eventually this one here I just decided, you know what, let's just go through the Final Fight series. It was about 2 years ago or so. So I went through Final Fight 1, which is still my favorite one, and then part 2 and part 3. And with Final Fight 3, so again, it originally came out on the Super Nintendo. I want to say maybe like 1995 or 1996 or so. I'm not quite sure. As again, I didn't play it back then. It was just again more recently that I played it. And honestly, it's not a horrible game. It's just it felt a little bland. Like there wasn't a whole lot to it and all that really made it like a standout for me. And really, it made me, if anything, appreciate the Streets of Rage series a lot more. One thing that made the Streets of Rage game so much fun was that aside from the really tight gameplay, great beat 'em up action on it and all, and controls, is that it also the way it varied up the locations, the stages, and your move set and all was just a lot more interesting and kept you hooked more, along with an excellent music and all. And so they were just a lot more funner to play through. Where this one, I mean, the graphics aren't bad; they're fine enough. They're just nothing really that I like. I don't really remember any stages on it, and the fighting action, it's fun, and all. But again, I felt like it just didn't feel too inspired and all. Um, and one thing also that I feel like a beat 'em up needs to have is decent music too, as you're kind of going along beating up bad guys and all that. And again, it just didn't seem that much fun, or that much. I don't remember the music much on it. It was just it felt a little generic. And the characters that you select, I mean, there's Hagar, which is he's always fun to control. But then there was what was it, Dean and Lucia, I believe. And yeah, I mean, they're cool enough characters, I guess, but just nothing that I felt really added a whole lot to, not only in like gameplay style and all, but also in their career, in their character design and everything. And I know it sounded a little negative on this game and all. I just remember I played it, I beat it. I was like, okay, cool. That was, kind of forgettable, right? And but I guess back then and all, it would have been a decent beat 'em up to get into. I just feel like with Final Fight, because I do enjoy the first one. For me, that series peaked with that one, and then after that, the next two that came out afterwards were just I don't know. I didn't feel they were that great. I think there was like a Final Fight 3D game, like a one-on-one fighter, actually. I think it came out on the Saturn, maybe the arcade. I don't quite recall, but I don't remember that one being anything too special. And then eventually, I think Final Fight kind of more kept its name going by having all its character appearances, and also kind of molding itself into the Street Fighter universe, because you had a lot of characters that eventually went over to the Street Fighter fighting series, right? Like Cody, Guy, the what's that? Andre, the giant looking dude. I forgot his name. Hugo. And then I think even Poison, the um, and let's see, there were some other ones. But then I think in Street Fighter 6, when you're doing the open world sort of story mode, I think that takes place in, what is it called, Mad City. So I guess that's how the Final Fight has sort of been kind of carried on. But the games themselves, and all, they just kind of fizzled out after a while and all. But again, they're not a bad series and all. They're definitely, if you just want some quick beat 'em up action and you want to try something specifically on the Super Nintendo, there's definitely worse options. So I would say for the Super Nintendo, aside from like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, I mean, I guess the Final Fight games would probably be the next best beat 'em ups on the system. I just felt this Genesis did a little bit better on that there, unless I'm missing a series, but either way. Yeah, Final Fight 3. It's okay, and all. Like I said, right? If you played the first one and you just want to, finish the series, and sure, it's not like a horrible game and all. It's just not anything that I can recall too much. But what I can recall a lot though is the next game though, and that's Chrono Trigger. And so I'll go ahead and talk about it a bit here, because I was thinking, because I was going to talk about it here, because it came out in 1995, here in the States anyways. I don't quite recall when it came out in Japan, maybe late 1994, I don't know, early 95. But Chrono Trigger, so this is one of the all-time greats. It lands at, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's my sixth favorite game of all time. And Chrono Trigger, basically, so it came out here in the United States in 1995, and it was made by kind of a collaboration by what ended up being called the Dream Team. And so that was uh, between Hironobu Sakaguchi, who he was one of the head honchos there at Square, the creator of Final Fantasy and all, And at the time, I don't quite know what his role was. I don't know how much of a hand he was still having, because I know he had a lot of hand in Final Fantasy VI, but that's kind of when he started handing off the torch to Kitase. And but basically he was still very much involved with Final Fantasy. And then also Yuji Horii, who he's basically more or less the same kind of guy, but for Dragon Quest, one of the the main creator of it and all. And then Akira Toriyama, the legendary anime manga artist, rest in peace. And so my understanding of what happened on how they got together was that it was on some kind of a plane trip. I think they were coming. Well, I think Yuji Horii and Hironobu Sakaguchi. I think they were coming over here to the United States for some kind of a conference and all. I believe I could be wrong on this, but basically on the plane ride and all, they just started discussing of what this would look like. What would a game between them look like? And so they eventually got to working on it. I believe that at the time, Square had just finished up or was finishing up Final Fantasy VI. And so, because Final Fantasy VI came out in 1994, and I've read a lot of stories during this time frame of how a lot of these developers were really overworking themselves. And I mean, they were just coming out after masterpiece after masterpiece. I mean, the stretch from like 1994 to 2001, there was just so many amazing RPGs from Square that for anyone who is newer to the hobby and all, and if you've been playing maybe some of the Final Fantasy games and all, you haven't been too thrilled with them, and you're like, what's the big deal with this series and all that? I'll just say from like 1994 to 2001, mainly with like Final Fantasy 6 to Final Fantasy 10, and then a lot of other Square projects in between, like Chrono Trigger, Xenogears, Parasite Eve. There was a huge output of games during that stretch right there that were just absolutely legendary and game changing. And so that's why we really have a lot of fond memories of Square because of what they were outputting during that time. I mean, it was just amazing. But anyway, Square was finishing up so there were no SquareSoft at the time. They were finishing up Final Fantasy VI, or they were just finishing it up, and they were starting to work on Final Fantasy VII. But Final Fantasy VII was in really early prototype stages, and but they had already gotten Chrono Trigger going, and eventually they stopped doing work on Final Fantasy VII and jumped over to help out to finish the Chrono Trigger, and so that game eventually came out in 1995. Um, the what was I gonna say? Sorry. So yeah, because it was SquareSoft and then Enix. Because it wasn't Square Enix at the time; it was SquareSoft, and Enix was its own separate company. Enix was, of course, doing the Dragon Quest games, and then they had a lot of other like RPGs and action RPGs on the side. Like I believe they had, what is it? Was it Illusion of Gaia? The ActRaiser games, I believe. I could be wrong on some of those, but Dragon Quest was kind of their main game, though. And so it wasn't eventually until I think 2001 or so, or 2000. No, would have been about 2002 or three when they ended up merging. But yeah, but basically something along the lines of that, and all right, where they ended up getting this game completed, and just ended up being an absolute masterpiece. And what makes this game so special is the because it really was sort of a combination of the genius of these three creators, because you had the kind of the I guess the mysticism and all and epicness of like Final Fantasy game, right? And again, we had just had Final Fantasy 6 and already raved about that game earlier, so it had that sense of like scope of epicness and all that. But I didn't know it at the time, but what the Dragon Quest games are really well known for, as I know them now, is that they are just really good at giving you this sense of adventure, and where it's a little light-hearted, but at the same time also has can be a little dark at times too. And it really combines those two together really well. And then the characters are just very lovable. I mean, you immediately get into the characters, and a lot of it has to do with just the way that they're written. They're very, very well written and designed also by again by Akira Toriyama, where they very much have a very unique look. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, that does kind of look like a Dragon Quest game. But then you play it, and I was like, but it definitely feels like Final Fantasy. So really, I mean, it's kind of hard to describe. It's just it was, and that's because those two series were becoming, they were like almost at the peak of the series, right? Or at least in those early days and all, right, where Dragon Quest was already, at least in Japan, was highly popular. Up until that point, we were up to Dragon Quest V, because I believe Dragon Quest VI came after that, and then for Final Fantasy, we were up to Final Fantasy VI. So they were almost like neck and neck during this time, as far as like their output of games and all the quality of the games and everything. They were like almost neck and neck at this time, and so then this was just sort of like, hey, for fans of both series, here you go. Here's a game that combines the best of both worlds, and absolutely amazing. And the other thing too, also that really makes it stand out, that makes it very memorable for a lot of people, is the music too, as well. Because the Final Fantasy games, well, they've had up to this point, right, and all, where it was Nobuo Uematsu, he's done the music for Dragon Quest. I'm sorry, for Final Fantasy games, and then for Dragon Quest games, well, they had their composer. Let's see, I always forget his name. Let's see, the late Koichi Sugiyama, and so both of them have a very unique style for their series. But for this one here, though, it was Yasunori Mitsuda who ended up doing the music for it, and I mean, he eventually had an amazing body of work that he ended up doing for composing in a lot of different video games, from like Xenogears and some other games. And yeah, I mean, his work on Chrono Trigger was just absolutely amazing. And I think it was, I don't know if it was his first video game that he did or not, but I want to say that he was really, I've heard something that he really fought to get the job. And I mean, I think I even heard he was hospitalized or so. While he was working on this project. But I mean, ultimately, it was just an amazing soundtrack that he ended up composing. I mean, just about every single song in that game is very memorable, fits the game like a glove, and will just linger in your head for years and years. I mean, I still have the Chrono Trigger music playing in my head now, and just absolutely amazing, and definitely one of the better soundtracks on the Super Nintendo. And it took advantage of what the Super Nintendo sound chip could do really well, which was more sort of symphonic, orchestrated sounding music. And it's really quite stunning. It almost sounds city quality. And then, of course, if you listen to actual symphonic arrangements of the soundtrack, it's just amazing. And I mean, the music is very inspiring. It definitely gives you the sense of adventure, just like the main theme song. And it also has its sort of like mysticism about it and all, and has a very catchy battle theme that you'll be hearing quite a bit and all. And just definitely, it's a joy to listen to as you're playing the game, right? And the game is a joy to play too. Also, it's very, I think one of the things that made this game really popular was that the battle system, it's very reminiscent of like what Final Fantasy was doing, where you had your ATB gauge and all, and even the UI and everything looks very reminiscent to Final Fantasy. But it did change up some things, though, where up to this point, pretty much most turn-based RPGs, the battles would be random, right? Where you're walking around the world map or a dungeon or whatever, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're fighting an enemy. And which, can be a little annoying, right? And so what this game did, though, was that it mostly got rid of that there, where you see your enemies ahead of time. And so instead of being on a world map and then eventually you get into a battle and it switches over to a different battle screen, this one here, you see your enemy. And if you choose to engage with them, then you'll fight the enemies right then and there, right? It doesn't switch over to like another battle screen and all. And so that just made everything feel really seamless. And there were some pretty cool moments on, I say mostly not random, because there are some scenes that are sort of battles that are sort of scripted that you have to fight them, but it kind of started giving a little bit of a cinematic feel to that and all, as on how you engage with some of the enemies. And you have your standard attack, magic. As you learn, each character has a certain magic that you can use. Like Chrono, he can use lightning. Marl or Marley, I don't know how you pronounce her name, but she can do ice, and then Frog can do water. Luca can do fire, and so forth. And so you got is, and then you level up your as you level up your magic levels up and all. But one of the more unique features of the battle system on this game, though, is when as you get your characters and all, they eventually start learning these combo moves, or where they could, well, dual text or triple text, where basically, you can take two characters and they'll do a certain move. Or you can even learn moves where all three of your characters, right, are doing a move, and usually, for like really high damage output. And it was always fun experimenting with those, because like, there's quite a bit of combinations, right, between all the different characters that you can eventually get in this game, and then all the different duo techniques that they can do, right? Like, Chrono and Frog will have certain moves, and then Marl and Luca will have certain moves together, and or all three of them, right? And also, you can imagine, right, there's quite a bit of combination of those, and they were just really fun to experiment with. As your characters level up and all that, right, you'll learn more techniques and all. And some of the graphical effects too of some of these spell moves were really impressive too, taken up from where Final Fantasy VI was doing, and then Chrono Trigger took it a step up also. So the game is really nice to look at. Beautiful pixel art. Again, the how the Akira Toriyama characters translated over to the pixel art and all, they look really just really amazing. And some of the backdrops and all that are just really really well done. And yeah, just so that's the other thing, right? It's just a really fun RPG to play. It kind of moves at a pretty brisk pace, and so even for people that aren't too much into turn-based RPGs, so this one moves along fairly quickly and all. So I think that people will maybe have a little bit more patience to get into this game. And not only the battle system, but also the story as well too. It's not a very long game as far as RPG goes, but I think that's one of the things that people have appreciated a lot about it, is that it kind of moves along pretty quick, doesn't really waste your time. Everything about the game is just it's like it feels like it has its purpose, and it just moves along really quickly and all, but not like in a way where you feel like you're being strung along for the ride, right, and all. I mean, it really. I mean, you're just kind of hooked, from the moment it goes go, because basically it's a time traveling tale, right? So, basically, you are Chrono and you meet Marl, and then she ends up going to the past, and then that kind of starts messing with things. But then in that process, you start learning about this a certain evil, and so then that takes you across all kinds of different time generations, and anywhere from way back in the past to in the distant future and in between. And so it's just a lot of fun to see how this world changes, right, and all within the different time periods that you're in. And it's just a lot of fun. And on again, it's just kind of it's carrying you through the story uh, at a pretty rapid pace. But again, that's not a bad thing. I mean, you're getting enough character development, you're getting a lot of cool moments, and like I said, every single moment is in the game and all. Wherever whatever you're doing in the game, it feels like it has purpose. And I think that's one thing that people really appreciate about this, because a lot of RPGs, sometimes there just feels like there's a lot of filler moments. This one really doesn't. I mean, everything feels like you appreciate every section that you're in this game, because again, you're getting treated to fun battles, fun character development, a lot of great whimsical writing on it, and all a fun sense of adventure, amazing music throughout, and so you just really enjoy your time that you're in this game. But it's not to say that it doesn't have some side content, because it definitely does. It has a lot of side content in it and all that. You can extend the play period a little bit more than just like, 'cause I would say, I don't know, maybe 20 hours or so, give or take, right, on your first playthrough. So it has some side content that you can definitely get into, but it also has a lot of multiple endings on it too. I don't know the exact number. I've only actually beaten the game once, so I don't. I've only seen what I would think is kind of the more canon ending, but there's definitely a lot of endings in the game, and just depending on, you can trigger them by meeting certain requirements in the game or doing a certain something. I don't know. I haven't messed around with that part of it too much, but it was one of the first games, if not the first game, that started introducing New Game Plus in an RPG. So basically, when you beat the game, then all your stats and all, I believe most of your stats and everything carry over, right? Maybe your equipment too, to the New Game Plus. And so then that way it just helps you beat the game easier, right? And all, if you choose to go after all the endings. I don't know how many endings it has. I don't think it's in the double digits, but um I'm not sure. But yeah, just and so, because but basically it has a lot of replayability value for that. Let's see. How many endings does it have? 12? I'm seeing 12. Is that right? Oh, maybe it does have in the double digits. But I don't know. I'm sure someone out there knows how much, right? But yeah, it has a lot of endings on it and all, and definitely can keep you busy for that there. Some of the endings from what I've heard, they're just kind of more like fun endings, right? It's not like anything too serious. But yeah, but basically a lot of content there, right? For you to have fun with there. And so again, so the game originally came out in the Super Nintendo back in 1995. I want to say it was around mid 95 or so. And around the time that the game came out, our friend that had the Super Nintendo, we immediately rented it the moment we could find it. So I think we played it roughly around launch time or so. And we didn't quite beat it back then, but we got pretty far into it because I remember, yeah, I mean, we got pretty far into it. Now that I've beaten the game and all, yeah, we were towards the end. And I just remember having a blast with it and all because I remember thinking Final Fantasy VI is amazing. It'll never be top. Next year, boom, Chrono Trigger. And I like Final Fantasy VI a slight hair more, but the fact that they were pretty much almost on equal ground and all, it was amazing, right? That we got two RPGs like that back to back. And yeah, it was definitely another game that I was like, yeah, I can't be just a one console gamer, right? Because there was so much stuff that was coming out on the Super Nintendo that I just felt that I eventually needed to maybe get the system somehow or eventually play it and all. Again, it wouldn't be until a few years where I was working on my own and all and had my own money and all to buy stuff and all. And honestly, Chrono Trigger, I don't think I actually, I never bought the cartridge of it. I don't think I ever did any, because I never had the Super Nintendo. So I think that the first time actually when I really sat down and started beating the game or trying to beat the game was again, on the virtual console, on the Wii. And but it wasn't actually until more recently. I think it was actually like what 2 years ago when I finally beat it for the first time. And for whatever reason, I just never, it was always one of my favorite games of all time. I just never actually beat it until, oh, yeah, it was about 2 years ago, and I beat it on the version on Steam. And so, because I had Freddy Racing on my Steam Deck, and also I got it on there, and eventually I hunkered down and beat it. And I think with Chrono Trigger, one of the reasons that I never really ended up beating it sooner was that I just almost like it's kind of weird. Like, I mean, I held the game to such a high esteem back then, and with all the different games that have come out since then, and all the more modern times, I was like, maybe it's not gonna like stand up to the games nowadays. But like I said, around 2 years ago or so, I finally told myself, let's beat this game and all that, and I finally did. And no, the game holds up. I mean, it is still an absolute masterpiece, and glad I finally ended up beating it. At least getting one of the endings. The version on Steam, I feel like it plays pretty good after it's been patched. Because I think it was patched a lot. The only thing that at least on the Steam Deck, when you're moving diagonally, the screen kind of stutters along. I don't know if there's a fix for that. But other than that, I mean, it plays pretty good. You can also get the game if there's a DS version, which adds some new content and changes the script a little bit. And there's also, you can get it on the Android and on the iOS stores, but those versions tend to be a little glitchy. So just heads up on that. Um, but yeah, Chrono Trigger, absolute masterpiece, and definitely one of the all timers. And if you have any interest in video games, if you're open to like playing any kind of genre and all that, this is one of the all-time greats, right? I mean, if you look up like a list of like the best games of all time, going from all kinds of different generations, right? You're going to see Chrono Trigger pretty much up there most of the times. If you're not into RPGs, but you have a passing, but you have a curiosity, right, of just video games in general, give it a try. You might actually get sucked into it because again, it even if you're like more of an action gamer and all, the story moves along pretty quickly and all that it might even hook you. So yeah, and as far as which version to play, I mean, I would maybe do the Android and the iOS ones as kind of a last resort, even though there's some of the more accessible ones. But the one on Steam. All right, sorry, little interruption there. So not quite sure where I left off, but I know I was talking about Chrono Trigger. But yeah, ultimately, just to finish off on Chrono Trigger, just an amazing game. Definitely check it out. And Oh, yeah, I think I was talking about like the versions to play. So yeah, the one on Steam is not that bad, and then the if you can somehow get the Super Nintendo or emulate it, I mean that's a good version too. The DS version is also pretty good. It fixes it, it updates the script with a little bit more polished, but does lose certain charm to it, like the way Frog talks. Excuse me, in the original Super Nintendo, he talks like in a very old English Shakespearean kind of way. Where in the newer versions, it's I mean, he still has a kind of a unique way of talking, but it's not quite as I guess as dramatic, I guess, as the Super Nintendo one. But yeah, either way, however you can, definitely recommend you play it. Okay, so the last game that I picked here, started going off a little bit on that game. I kind of forgot what I picked. Oh yeah, the Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. I don't know much about this one. I haven't played it yet. I've gone through the Uncharted games, so Uncharted, Drake's Fortune, Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, and then Part 3, Drake's Deception. And so I've played those. Oh, and then Uncharted 4, a Thieves End, and really enjoyed them. I mean, that's an amazing series. I absolutely love that series. But I never did play the what is it called, the Uncharted Golden Abyss, I think, on the PlayStation Vita, and also I haven't played this one, the Lost Legacy one. I do have it though, where I can play it. Because I got the PlayStation 5 package where it has of Uncharted 4, where it has a Thief's End, and then also this one. So yeah, will be fun to check out at least for a little bit, right, and all, and see what the game's all about. But yeah, but in that I don't have a whole lot on that one. I just know that you play as two of the they were kind of like side characters throughout the series. It was Chloe and Nadine. Chloe was mainly in part two, part of it in part three, and I don't was she in part four? I don't think she was. And then Nadine, she was a character. I'll just say that in part four. So yeah, so it will be interesting to see it. Part four, I mean, especially when it's running on the PlayStation 5, it looks stunning. I mean, it's definitely one of the best looking games out there. It really looked really good on the PlayStation 4, and then you bump it up to 60 frames per second on the PlayStation 5, and yeah, it looks absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm looking when I look at something like Uncharted 4, right? And I'm sure with the Lost Legacy 2 also, since it, runs on the same engine as far as I can tell. I mean, yeah, I'm looking at that, I'm like, do we really need graphics to be any better than this? I mean, seriously, I'm sure there's things you can improve on here and there, but it'd be really minor details and all. I know we've always said this before that, graphics will never get better than they do. I don't know now. I mean, I'm like, because like how much of it has it changed, right? Since Uncharted 4 came out in 2016, and then Lost Legacy, I think 2017, give or take. I don't, so, but almost a decade ago, and they still look amazing, and probably still better than a lot of games, in my opinion, that have been coming out recently. So that's what I'm saying. I think we did kind of hit a bit of a ceiling as far as like how much better graphics can look like. But anyway, that's a subject for another day. But yeah, other than that, like I said, I don't have a whole lot more to say on it. Other than I know you played those two characters. It's a bit of a like an expanded DLC sort of, because I mean, it came out as its own game, but I think it was priced a little bit cheaper when it first came out, and so it's kind of like in that in between where it's not quite DLC, but not quite a full game. Is sort of what I understand of it. But yeah, will be fun to check out because that is one that I missed out on that I haven't played. But yeah, so those are the three games there. So Final Fight 3. I mean, like I said, if you have a passing interest in just beat 'em ups in general, sure, check it out, but I wouldn't rush to play it. Chrono Trigger, for some reason you haven't played it, absolutely, absolutely. And Uncharted Lost Legacy, I don't know. So I'll check it out and see if it's any good. I'll try to put up my little thoughts on it on my YouTube shorts that I've been doing. Um, but all right, let's get now into some just modern gaming news, kind of gaming news in general. And so did want to start this off a little bit with a bit of a heartwarming story, but it ultimately relates to video games and kind of exposes me on what my favorite game of all time is, which I've already mentioned it several times if you've been watching anything that I've been doing. And so kind of a cute story and all, but it is video game related. And well, to an extent. But so my youngest daughter, she started going to school this week. or this past week, and Thursday was the first day that I took her on my own, right, and all to drop her off at school and pick her up. So my youngest daughter, she has this thing where she just constantly is asking us, "What is our favorite something?" Right? So, what is your favorite food? What is your favorite movie? And this, and so, or what? So I'll just answer her right and all, and she just, I think she just gets a kick out of it, and so she'll ask me like, what is your favorite food? I like tacos. What is your favorite dog? I like the Akita dog. What is your favorite movie? I like The Dark Knight. What is your favorite game? The Final Fantasy VII. And so I'll just repeat it. Like she's like, "Oh, okay." And so I was like, I don't know how much of that is sticking in her mind and all. Yeah, but she just asks that a lot, and it's not like she asks any follow up questions. She just asks that, and then she repeats it over and over and over again. Just I think in her mind, I think she just likes to know that. And so when I dropped her off at school on Thursday, she's still a little, getting used to it and all, and so she's gets a little sad when we drop her off. And so on Thursday when I took her, she kept telling me throughout the whole morning, right? That I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school, and all. And I'm like, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." And so finally, when we actually started getting to the school and all, and we were walking up towards the school, she just kept asking me questions like, "You're going to pick me up, right, Daddy? You're going to pick me up?" I was like, "Yes, I'm going to pick you up after school. I'm going to be right here. I'm going to pick you up. What are you going to do, Daddy? What are you going to do?" And so I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'm just probably, I'm only going to have like about an hour and a half or two or so. So I'm just probably going to go home and, just chill for a bit, I guess. And she's like, "You gonna be on the couch, Daddy?" And she's kind of tearing up as she's saying this. "You gonna be on the couch, Daddy? You play your favorite game, Final Fantasy VII?" And so I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be playing Final Fantasy VII, but I'm just gonna be chillaxing and all. But just it's funny because again, she just asked that at random, and then it's like that one thing kind of stuck in her mind to ask me that, right? And all that. So I think she was just trying to work out through her emotions, all in all, and a bit of anxiety that she had, right? As she was trying to go to school. So she just very much like wants to know, what are you doing, and all that. And then once she knows what you're doing, then she's kind of set with that. So I think it was just in her mind, okay, Daddy's gonna be home. He's gonna pick me up. He's just gonna be at home playing Final Fantasy VII, and so I'm good. I'm good. But it's just good because it was kind of a random when she told me that. But my poor little girl. But she did amazing though, and so I'm so happy for her. But anyway, that was a cute little story. Um, but beat finally. So two games that I actually beat this week. One of them that I've been working on for a while, and that was Shinobi Art of Vengeance. So I finally beat it. So after I beat Clear Obscure, right, usually, not always, but usually what I try to do is if I'm playing a longer game like an RPG or an open world game and all that, and then once I'm done with it, I do like to take a little bit of a break before I jump into another big game. And so usually I'll like try to beat like shorter games, like whether if it's a retro game, indie game, or just like some fun like fighting games or racing games or puzzle games and all that, kind of in between to mix it up a bit, or games that I've gone a little ways into. I just need to finish them off, and so that was the case with Shinobi Art of Vengeance. I'm like, okay, I'm towards the end. Let's just finish this game off, and yeah, I ended up beating it. And yeah, cool game. I really enjoy Shinobi Art of Vengeance. Uh, this year, most of the games that are going to be my top 10 games of the year for me personally are 2D games. It's crazy. But yeah, but Art of Vengeance is it's a very fun game. It's honestly, I mean, I do really enjoy it. I think it's good. It's a return to form for Sega to an extent, but I don't think I liked it more than Revenge of Shinobi or even Shinobi 3. I don't think I did. But and again, that's just maybe just because I'm just old school and all, and stuck in my ways and all. But it's still good. It's an absolutely fun action game, and I'm still going through Ninja Gaiden Ragebound to see which of the two Ninja games were better this year for like the 3D Ninja games, or I'm sorry, 2D Ninja games. But it's definitely fun. And Joe Musashi, he's he is a very fun character to control. He's actually one of my favorite 2D characters to control. The issues that I kind of had with it is that sometimes the levels drag out a little bit too long, and when it comes to like 2D games and all, sometimes I kind of hate that. But this it wasn't too bad, and so don't want you to think that that's like to steer you away from the game and all if you have any interest in it. But it's definitely cool. I had a lot of fun. I did have a lot of fun with it, and the story that it has, it's a little, I mean, just kind of typical anime action story. No, nothing too big and all, but it hooks you enough, right, and all to that you'll get some kind of enjoyment out of it. But really, it's about the action gameplay in it, the crazy combos you can pull off, and just going through all the different cool stages on it, and has some pretty cool like sections where you're riding on something, like whether if it's your dog or what is it, I believe a surfboard, and I think there was another one, but yeah, I mean, it's cool. The last stage, the way the last stage opens up, I actually had to take a screenshot of it because I thought it looked so cool. Uh, Not to spoil anything too much, but I'll just say that it reminded me a lot of a certain scene. If you've, well, I think pretty much everyone on the planet has almost watched it, Avengers Endgame. I'll just leave it at that. And I was like, oh, that is so cool. I wasn't even expecting it, but yeah, that was pretty cool though. So yeah, Revenge of Shinobi, awesome game, and looking forward to see what else Sega can still keep doing as they have their other games and some of their legacy IPs, like the Golden Axe game, the new Streets of Rage game, the what is it, the Crazy Taxi and Jack Ryan Radio. We haven't heard anything about him though, because Shinobi was one of the ones announced along with that, but they haven't announced anything on the other one. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess what happens with that. But the other game too, also that I beat was that Neon Inferno game. So if you've been listening to this podcast or whatever thing that I'm doing, I talked about this a few weeks ago, where I felt like I had this attachment to this Neon Inferno game. So long story short, some years ago, again, I already talked about this, and also I'll just recap it really quick. But some years ago, in the early 2000s, I wrote this screenplay. It was called The Last City, and it was very much based like a cyberpunk sort of a sci-fi story where you play like a bounty hunter slash hitman, and you're taking on some bad guys, and eventually some yakuza like enemies end up being involved in the story and all. Um, and I would draw out the characters, and so basically this Neon Inferno, the character when I first saw it, right, he looked very reminiscent to the character that I had designed, slick back hair, trench coat. The trench coat's a different color and all that. My character was named Angel Moreno. This character's name is Angelo Morano, and it has a big cross also, although the cross on this one is gold. The one that I had was silver. You're taking on the Yakuza in this one. You're taking on like this kind of corrupt police and all. I had a lot of that in my script, and so when I look at this game, I was like, this is kind of sort of what I was envisioning back then. And so I felt like I had a personal attachment to this game because of that, because it's like, well, at the very least, I get to see some kind of interpretation of what I kind of had in mind back then. And so I was just kind of over the moon when I was playing this game for that reason alone, for, that personal reason there. And so, again, that's why I was always going to be a little bit biased towards this game for that. But on its own, I ended up beating the game, and it's not that long, so that's kind of a bit of a knock on the game. Even though I know I just talked about how I don't like necessarily super long games on a 2D game, but this one is a bit short. I could have used one more level, maybe one more level, but it's still really fun. It's the pixel art on it. It's just amazing. Probably some of the best. And again, the cyberpunk inspired setting, I'm a big sucker for. In so many ways, this is sort of like a gaming wet dream for me because it's. I mean, I do enjoy like really fast paced, fun action games. Check on this one. Kind of plays like a combination of like Metal Slug meets Wild Guns, and but then you have this very cyberpunk futuristic setting. Check, that definitely checks boxes for me. The pixel artwork just looks amazing. Like there was this one section where the lighting that it did on it was crazy, because you're in this club scene, and so there's like these neon lights, right, and all the rave lights flashing, but then there's also like that smoke effect, and all that you see on a lot of raves. And so you're fighting these enemies in the background, and the way, depending on how the light hits and then the smoke hits, you can kind of see the enemy in the background, you can kind of nod. It makes for like this really cool effect. And then also when you're in that club scene and there's all these people running and all, I was like, holy crap, I didn't know that one of the coolest like club scenes that I've ever experienced, whether if it's in a movie, a game, or what, is in this 2D pixel art game. It's really cool. The music is excellent. It's kind of a combination of like kind of techno-ish, kind of rock, but then there's also like these almost like Blade Runner sounding music from, the very reminiscent of like what Vangelis did on that movie. Like I said, I was over the moon on this game. I was like, this is just like almost like someone went into my brain and said, okay, this is what this fucker likes. Let's put it out there. Cool action, cyberpunk setting, awesome music like this. boom, right? And yeah, I love it. It's actually ended up being one of my favorite games of this year. Again, it's not that long though, but I had a blast playing it. It was a very fun few days, right? And all when I bought this game when it came out, like what Wednesday or so, whatever it was last week. Like I said, I didn't take me too long to beat it and all, but it's still a game that I definitely want to replay it again a lot. And it's fairly cheap because it was for $20 and then it was a little bit and then it was on sale too also. So I think I only paid like $17 for it or so on the Switch. Um, it doesn't have like a Switch 2 version as far as I can tell, but I've been playing it on the Switch 2 and it seems to run fine. I mean, I haven't really noticed any major issues with it. I have heard though, I think I saw some post on it that the Switch version, so if you're playing on the original Switch, it doesn't run that well. So maybe if that's the one you're gonna get, maybe do a little bit of research on it. But if you get it on the PlayStation, Steam Deck, or on the Xbox, I'm sure those versions run fine. But yeah, I highly recommend it if you want to play some just like a cool action game. I'm so glad that game turned out good. Um, we're also getting where I saw this announcement. I thought this was kind of like the most oddest collection of games that is coming out by limited run games, and I mean I think it's cool. And all if again, a lot of what I'm doing here is for video game archiving, video game preservation, to an extent. Well, I mean, if anything, I'm just talking about them and all, but I'm all about that. And so there's a Ernest Evans collection coming out from Limited Run Games. I didn't see when it's coming out, but it's coming out, and I thought that was kind of interesting that because it has Ernest Evans, which is a Sega Genesis game, which I've never played it, but it just looks weird the way your character animates and all it just looks, I don't know, it looks weird. But then there was also another Genesis game which is actually pretty cool. It's called El Viento, and in this one you play another character. Her name is Annette, and Ernest Evans only plays like a side character in that one, I believe. But that one is actually pretty cool. And then there's also Annette Again, which is a game that was on the Sega CD only in Japan. And I remember reading about that in GameFan magazine. If you wanted to on my YouTube channel, again, I go through I've been reading through the GameFan magazines, and so that's one of the earlier issues. I talk about that game a bit, and it was a game that never came out here in the States and all. I just remember seeing the screenshots of it and was always a little curious about it. But yeah, we're getting a compilation on those three games. That's a blast from the past. So might be interesting to check out. If anything, El Viento is the one that is really good. Yeah, again, you control Annette. It's like a fast-paced action game. You use sort of almost like a boomerang as your main weapon, but she moves along really fast in the game. And then you have some magic power-ups, I believe. And it takes place, I believe, like in the 1920s or so. So has an interesting anime aesthetic to it and all, but set in that time frame in the United States. Or maybe you do a little bit of world hopping. I don't quite know, but yeah, at least I know with El Viento that's a pretty good game. So. But we also had Tomb Raider, the one that came out in the 2013. So it was a reboot of the series from Crystal Dynamics. That just kind of it got shadow dropped on the Nintendo Switch. So that's cool. Excellent game. It's really excellent. I have it on the Steam and then also on the PlayStation 4, so I think I'm good on that one. But it is an excellent game. I saw like a quick comparison video, and so from what it looks like, the Switch 2 version seems to run pretty good, but it doesn't seem to be quite as detailed as like the PlayStation 4 one that came out, the definitive edition one. So, I mean, it still looks like it runs well enough, plays well enough. It looks like it was handled by Espear, which they're the ones that do. They did like the Knights of the Old Republic games that came out like on the Android and then also on the Switch. But for the most part, I mean, it seems like it's a decent enough port if you're interested in getting it on the Switch. But let's see. So Xbox apparently had some kind of a showcase of some sort, and so they showed off a few games. There was one game that I think it was called like Zoo Fury or so. I don't know if it's in the same franchise as that, or I guess no, a new franchise, I guess. What was that game called? Fist, where it's kind of like a Metroidvania where you're playing like this rabbit of some sort, and kind of in a steampunk sort of world. That game's okay. I played a little bit of it, and all. I'm actually kind of curious to play that one at some point, all the way through. But I think this one is in the same universe, but it looks to be like more of a hack and slash kind of 3D game. I'm not sure, but the graphics on it look pretty good and all. So that game looked okay. But the one that looked absolutely stunning, and it's a game that I've had on my radar when I first saw it, when they announced it, I don't know, maybe about a year ago or so. But it's this game called Tides of Annihilation. And so this game, I believe, is being developed in China. So it's one of those, if it is, then it's one of those bunch of games that they're coming out with over there and all. But I think they announced it last year, and just the scope of the game and all looked really impressive. But they showed off like this gameplay trailer, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this game looks like what I thought video games would look like, around this time. Like, I don't know, maybe let's say when the seventh generation was out, so like the Xbox 360 and the PS3. I mean, graphics were already getting pretty good back then, right? But I was like, God, what are games going to look like 10 years from now and all that, and all, or 20 years from now? And I think in my brain, I kind of envision the game as far as like the graphic fidelity and all that of what like this game looks like. It looks absolutely amazing. And it seems to be kind of an action game. I don't know, maybe like something like Devil May Cry almost. So it doesn't seem like a Souls-like game. Uh, but you control this some kind of a female warrior. I don't know what exactly this game's all about, but it looks like in this very kind of surreal version of Europe, I think. I don't know. Some of the settings, though, well, little reminiscent of like what I was seeing in Clear Obscure. And anyways, the gameplay trailer shows off like you're fighting this one, what looks like a boss and all, but just like the graphics, the scope of everything, and how things are changing in real time, I was like, holy crap, this looks amazing. And so this is one that I do have on my radar. That I mean, it's visually it's very captivating to look at. And so if it plays well too, also, then this could definitely be a hit for. I don't know when it's coming out. I mean, they had a pretty in-depth gameplay trailer, and so it doesn't. It just says like to wish you can wish list it now. So I'm gonna assume in 2026, but I don't know. But wow, I mean, I that it's been a minute since I've been so impressed by like a new IP, and at least something that's coming out that's like a new IP and all for video games. And so this one definitely has my interest. It looks stunning. Um, if you haven't already, check out the trailer. It's if you do Tides of Annihilation gameplay trailer, and I'm sure that'll pop up, right. It just came out like a few days ago. Wow, I mean it looks stunning. Um, but another thing too also that happened was Call of Duty Black Ops 7 came out. Doesn't seem to be doing very well. So I don't know a whole lot about it. I just kept seeing that it was getting just panned everywhere. I mean it seems like it's fairly bare bones. Like it's I don't know. It looks like they messed up on it. And for a game like Call of Duty, which has always pulled in big numbers, it looks like it's been a little disappointing. So I don't know. Is Call of Duty finally getting a little bit too um people are getting bored of it now finally? I know for the past several years it's been kind of on a bit of a downward spiral. Well, last year, the one that came out last year, was it Black Ops 6? I lost track of him now. But that one did okay. I remember reading that it supposedly did okay, but I don't know. You can probably go down a deep rabbit hole with this on how Microsoft buying this and all that, putting it on Game Pass has sort of ruined it and all. And there's definitely something to talk about there. So I haven't really dived too deep into that, but yeah, from what it looks like, this is could be the sign of this series is finally starting to stale out. We'll see, but that's just what I kept reading and all that. This is a kind of a huge disappointment. So I don't know. For me, Call of Duty, I got into the series with there was what was it called? It was like one on the PlayStation 2, Well, no, I should say, well, I got it on the original Xbox. It was like late, like I think in 2005, and no, 2004, I believe. And then 2005, when the Xbox 360 came out, I got the Call of Duty 2. And so pretty much from like 2005, no, 2004, I should say, all the way up until I don't know, 2013 or so, with one of, I think it was like Black Ops 2, going back to like the first Black Ops 2. Uh I Up until then or so, I was getting the Call of Duty games pretty consistently, just because I was always, I've never been into the multiplayer part of it and all, but I always used to enjoy their single player campaigns. And no, it was actually with Infinity Warfare. I think that was the one that I finally stopped, like kind of gave up on the series, and I didn't mind that one too much. It's just that it started getting, I think afterwards and all, they were just more like, I don't know. The series just kind of started changing for me and all that. I was getting, I think I was getting a little bit burned out on the series, and then eventually went like more live service. Kind of looks like they wanted to be more inspired by that and all. Again, I could be wrong on that and all. I just know that once the single player campaigns of them started getting less and less of a focus, that's where I started checking out on the series, and it looks like it's definitely not catering to that part of gamers now. It just seems to be more the multiplayer stuff. But even then, it seems like it's not really doing that well on that either. So kind of sucks. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of cool Call of Duty games during that stretch there that I mentioned. But yeah, it looks like the series could finally be hitting its peak now. Because I think I saw something like even Battlefield 6 is even getting more popular. Something to that effect. I don't follow those two games too much, but I just know that Battlefield has always lived in has pretty much lived in the shadows of Call of Duty, but it looks like the tides could be turning. Tides of annihilation. I'm funny. Um, but also there was it's called like the Analog 3D, which is like basically what this company does is they make hardware that makes it look like a previous old console, like a retro console. So they did one, I believe, for the Genesis. Maybe some other systems, I don't know, but they came one out for the Nintendo 64. And so it's a console. So you can actually play like your cartridges of your retro system. So for example, this one, the Nintendo 64, and or like if you have one of those, what are they called? Ever drives or Evershares or whatever they're called. And so kind of like it's almost like so you're getting like a physical console instead of just like through emulation, my understanding of it. And then they can like output in 4K and all that is, and so I know there was some controversy where this system seemed to be like it was delayed a lot. But it looks like it finally came out, or at least to reviewers. And I was just, I don't, it's not something I would get, but I was just more out of curiosity. I was looking at some videos, and people seem to be kind of impressed with it, actually. So, that's cool for retro gamers and all, but wanting to get something new. So, like, if to actually have a system, and it looks fairly reminiscent to what the Nintendo 64 would look like. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. Um, but then also they showed off some pictures for the new Zelda movie. Um, it looks not that bad. It actually doesn't look too bad. It's they just released just a few pictures. Let's see, I forgot the actors' names. When they first showed off the actors, I'm not aware of who they are. I'm getting to the age now where I'm just not in tune with like a lot of the new actors out there and all that. But let me see if I can find it here. Okay, so okay, so Benjamin Evan Ainsworth as Link, and then Bo Bragison as Zelda. And I gotta say, from so there's like three official shots that they released. So one of them is like an up close look at his face of Benjamin as Link, and then also Bo Bragison and as Zelda, and then another picture where they're both kneeling and they're just kind of looking out into the looks like the landscape out, where it's like a lot of trees and grass and all that. And looks like it was filmed in New Zealand, but I'm assuming it's going to be Hyrule, right? And I gotta say, I'm impressed with what I see. I mean, Benjamin looks that's a Link, I mean, he looks like Link, and same thing with Zelda. Zelda, I mean, she's outfitted in her more like a hunter's sort of outfit. So looks like this is going to be more of an action-oriented Zelda than more of a just like a princess in the castle Zelda. So gives me a bit of a Breath of the Wild vibes, but Link does seem to have his green tunic. So I don't know. Just from these screenshots and all, I'm kind of impressed. I gotta say, it has my interest. I didn't think this would be something that I would really think would be good, but I don't know. Let's see. What I know is, let's see. So the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Wes Ball is directing it, and it's a screenplay from Jurassic World, Derek Conley. So according to Miyamoto on a tweet that he made on this, so this is Miyamoto. Filming is underway for the live-action film of The Legend of Zelda in a lush, natural setting with Bo Bregason-san, who will play Zelda, and Benjamin Evan Ainsworth-san, who will play Link. Filming is on track for the film's release on May 7th, 2027. It will take a while until the release, so we would be grateful if you would wait patiently and look forward to it. Interesting. I mean, like I said, I don't know. I'm curious. It has my curiosity, right? And also, I think I saw something. Let's see, is there a quote? It's something about a quote that someone, I don't know who said it, but it was that it was going for a serious and cool, but fun, also and whimsical. Is sort of the tone I guess they're going for, and I like that. I would like that it's not completely like goofy, right? But if it has a bit of a serious tone to it and all, but it is an adventure, and also, yeah, have a little bit of whimsicalness to it and all, like especially if you have a character like Navi or something like that. But I mean, just going from the screenshots or not, the pictures that they took here, it almost looks like something like Lord of the Rings almost inspired. So I don't know. It has my interest. It has my interest. I will say that much. So yeah, hopefully they can pull something off pretty good there. And then they showed off like it's like kind of like a announcement where it had so the movie's upcoming out from Nintendo because apparently they're going all in on this, right? So there was a Nintendo movie that we had in 2023, and then we're getting the Super Mario Brothers Galaxy movie next year, which actually looks okay. I mean, given what it is, right? I was actually kind of impressed with the trailer. I mean, I'm not like super wanting to watch it, but I'll probably buy one, and all. And then the Zelda movie looks decent, and then they had like two in the picture that they showed right of their upcoming releases, and then it had two boxes at the end with question marks on them. So it looks like they have two other projects that they're already working on. Speculation is that one of them would be a Donkey Kong movie, like maybe an animated movie in the lines of like the Super Mario Brothers movies, and the other one, who knows? We'll see. I'd be all for a Metroid movie, but because for me, the pillars of Nintendo are Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. Those three right there. Every generation, right? I always look like, okay, give me at least one good Mario game, at least one good Zelda game, and at least one good Metroid game. That's what I mainly go for Nintendo. Anything extra and all cool, right? And all, but those are like three pillars right there. So I would love to see if they were to do something Metroid, especially like if the Zelda movie comes out good. But when it comes down to it, though, as much as I have a lot of high praise for Metroid, I mean, I put them on almost even ground as Zelda and Mario. They just don't sell that well, apparently. So I don't think that'll be it. Maybe it'll be like some Pokemon or something. But I don't know. We'll see. But still, that's what's kind of cool. So also, the Xbox 360 turned 20 years old on the 22nd. So that was what? Yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Jesus. 20 years old already. So, yeah, I would say it's retro now. Man, the 360. Just reminisce a little bit about the 360. It had some hype going behind it, right? Because even though the Xbox, I mean, you know, it was a far stretch away from what the PlayStation 2 sold during that sixth generation. But the Xbox, though, it had some hype behind it. Halo 2 had come out in 2004, and then that gave a big bump to Xbox Live. So I think it had a bit of momentum going into the next generation in 2005 when the Xbox 360 released, because it had a good reputation. So the Xbox 360 gets announced. It's getting a lot of licenses and all that. It was a fairly powerful system. and just the excitement of a new generation. It was the first one out of the gate, or the seventh generation, and so it built up some hype. And for a good portion of that really long seventh generation, because if you remember, the seventh generation lasted from 2005 when the Xbox 360 came out all the way to 2013. So that was what, 8 years, right, of that generation there. And I mean, some of it has to do, I'm assuming, because of the recession we had and all that. And, and then the systems also had their failures and all. And, but that was a very competitive generation. And ultimately, in terms of sales, the PlayStation 3 did end up barely beating it at the end. But through a good portion of that generation, the Xbox 360 was on top, at least here in the United States. And so it was kind of the default system for many people during that stretch there. And it was, I mean, I've talked about this before, where at the end of the day, it didn't have a whole lot of exclusives on it. I mean, most everything that was good on the Xbox 360, I mean, I can play them elsewhere now, where like the PlayStation 3 still has games that are unique to that system. But for what it did, the ecosystem that it was bringing out, a lot of the innovations that I had, like Xbox Live Arcade and and then just Xbox Live and the controller, and all, and the ease of development on the system, well, easier to develop for and all. I mean, it really was a staple in a lot of people's, for the game console that they had during that generation. It was Xbox, it took on PlayStation, and it was kind of almost like a Sega story, right? Where, the Genesis back in the day with the Super Nintendo, where it went up against the big dog and it almost beat it. It almost did. But, some of the decisions that they started making, like roughly around 2010, 2011 and on, it, eventually led to what I feel was their downfall, right? Because then, leading into the Xbox One and all that, because when they started doing like the Connect and all that crap. But there was a stretch there, though, where the Xbox was like the de facto system, as they say. Of course, if you're willing to overlook the whole Red Ring of Death and all that, because that was a big deal. But yeah, that was it was a good system, and not my personal favorite Xbox system. For me, it's still the original Xbox. I just feel like that one had more originality to it and all. But I can definitely see why this one was most everyone else's favorite Xbox system. So if you're a newer gamer, always wondering like, what's the big deal with Xbox? Why do people like it so much? It sucks now, and all. Well, it was because, again, the first Xbox had some pull behind it, and then the Xbox 360 in the first halftime of during the first half of its lifetime is what people fondly remember it for, because those were the, I guess you could say those were the good old days for the Xbox. So 2001 to about 2011. So that decade right there, right? It was, Xbox was a good play. It was a big player, right, in the video game realm. So I know things are different now, but that decade though was pretty good for the Xbox. But yeah, geez, 20 years old. The seventh generation system is 20 years old. Holy crap. I'm getting old. But, well, for what it's worth, happy birthday, Xbox 360. Um, so did want to take a bit of time here also to go over the Game of the Year nominations. Or I don't know if it still lets me vote on these. Let me see if it does. But basically, they announced the nominees, right, for the Game of the Year awards. And honestly, I don't put too much into this and all. I mean, it's just kind of fun to look at and all. But I mean, yeah, I don't put too much stock into all this here and all, but I guess it'd be kind of fun, right, to go through here. I remember back when I was a kid, I always used to wish that something like this would exist for video games and all, like, they would for movies and all. And now we have it. So even though it's not, it's more of an ad more than anything. I think people joke around that it's not the Game Awards, it's the Jeff Keighley show. But we'll have a little bit of fun with it here. So let's just kind of go through here. I'll put in my votes here. So for starting off with the main category, so Game of the Year. So the nominees are Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2 on the Beach, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Hades 2, Hollow Knight Silksong, and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I'm gonna go with Clair Obscur. Um, yeah, that game. I mean, I already talked about it, right? And all. I mean, for what I've played, because I haven't messed around too. I've started a little bit of Hollow Knight Silksong, but I haven't gone too far into it. But probably my next pick would be Donkey Kong Bonanza, just because I'm not quite done with that game, but I'm getting close to the end, I believe, and it is fun. I would probably like Hollow Knight Silksong more, but again, I'm just going off of what I've played more of. All right, so next category. So best game direction. So some of this, again, I'm just going to be picking because I haven't played through all these games and all that, right? But best game direction. So that's Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, On the Beach, Ghost of Yote, Hades 2, and Split Fiction. A little bit that I played of Ghost of Yote, it seems really beautiful, but I got to give this one to Clair Obscur. I think even if I would have played the other ones and all, Clair Obscur just has an amazing, like, overall game, like, just the overall vision of this game is just amazing. So I'm going to give it a Clair Obscur. Best narrative. Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2 On the Beach, Ghost of Yote, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, or Silent Hill F. So again, I haven't really played much of these, so I'm going to go with Clair Obscur. I know this one's going to be a little bit biased, if you can't tell already. But again, it's just from what I've played. Best art direction. So again, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, On the Beach, Ghost of Yote, Hades 2, and Hollow Knight Silksong. Yeah, definitely Clair Obscur on this one too. Just the overall art direction in this game is just outstanding. Best score and music. So Christopher Larkin from Hollow Knight Silksong, Darren Core for Hades 2, Lorian Testard for Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, Toma Ottawa for Ghost of Yote, and Woodard and Ludwig Forsell for Death Stranding 2. Seems like we're getting... I mean, this year was dominated by a few games. Christopher Larkin, I hate to take this one away from you just because I really enjoyed your score on the first Hollow Knight, and I just haven't played enough of Hollow Knight Silksong to really know what that score is all about. But even then, I don't know if any soundtrack can top Clair Obscur's soundtrack, so I'm going to give it to that one. So another one for Clair Obscur. Best audio design. Battlefield 6, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, Ghost of Yote, or Silent Hill F. I would probably pick Battlefield 6, honestly. I mean, I haven't played this game at all, but the Battlefield games that I have played before in the past sound amazing. They really go all out on the sound effects on it. Clair Obscur, I love like the sound, like when you parry. It's so damn satisfying, uh, especially when you're playing it loud. But um, I didn't play a whole lot of Silent Hill F, but what I played, the definitely like the, when you play it loud and all, because I had my headphones on when I was playing Silent Hill F, and it definitely sounds spooky and all that. I'm gonna give it a Silent Hill F on this one. Change it up a little bit. But again, I don't have a whole lot of experience with with them all, and I figured I'd take one away from Clair Obscur. Oh, this is gonna be hard. Best performances. So Ben Starr from Clair Obscur, Charlie Cox from Clair Obscur, Erika Ishii from Ghost of Yote, Jennifer English from Clair Obscur, Konatsu Kato from Silent Hill F, and Troy Baker for the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Really, Indiana Jones have that? Oh yeah, because yeah, I guess it would qualify for it. Troy Baker did a pretty good job as Indiana Jones. Oh, dang. This one is... I can't say for Konatsu Kato for Silent Hill Life. I haven't played that game enough. And then for the Ghost of Yote, I would be playing the Japanese subtitles. I wouldn't play the English. I prefer to play that game with not the Japanese subtitle, but the Japanese voiceover. So I wouldn't know what Erika's performance is on that one, because I probably wouldn't play it in English. But this one's going to be between the three actors in Clair Obscur: Ben Starr, Charlie Cox, and Jennifer English. Oh, this is a tough one. Charlie Cox, for being a more mainstream actor, right? And all, he's also the guy with Daredevil. I love his work as Daredevil. I think he's an amazing Matt Murdock in Daredevil, and how he plays Gustav in this and in Claire Obscure, and he does an excellent job. I mean, just as a very kind of optimistic, very just a dude that you want to hang out with and all kind of guy. And I really liked how he played Gustav in Claire Obscure. But Ben Starr as Verso, I mean, I'm becoming a big fan of Ben Starr, and and then Jennifer English too was with my geez, this is a tough one. I'm gonna go with with Jennifer English, right? Yeah, I'm gonna go with Jennifer English. Uh, yeah, that's tough. I mean, yeah, honestly, all three of them would have been amazing, but a great pick. But I'm gonna go with Jennifer English just because I felt that how Miles' character, she's kind of in a way the main character in Claire Obscure, and she has a lot of powerful moments in it where Ben Starr and Gustav, I mean, they're both amazing in it, but one of them is for roughly about half of the game, and the other one is for roughly the other half. Um, and yeah, yeah. Well, I guess, geez, I kind of said a spoiler there, but I'll go with Jennifer English. Yeah, without getting into too much more detail on that. Though. Innovation and accessibility. So this is for recognizing software and or hardware that is pushing the medium forward by adding features, technology, and content to help games be played and enjoyed by an even wider audience. So I am probably not going to know too much on these here, but let's see: Assassin's Creed Shadows, Adam Fall, Doom: The Dark Ages, EA Sports FC 26, and South of Midnight. So I don't know what the accessibility options would be on these. The only ones that I have played is the Doom: The Dark Ages. I played it a little bit, and then also played a little bit of South of Midnight. I didn't really, I guess, experiment too much with what their accessibility options are. So I mean, South of Midnight actually seems kind of fun. Like I could get into that game, but I know for sure Doom is a game that I like, so I'm not really basing this on the accessibility options just because I don't know what they are in either one of these really. But I'm just going to choose Doom, and I know it's kind of a weak way of voting for that, but it's what I know. Gains for impact. So for a thought-provoking game with a pro-social meaning or message. So I don't know these games. So Consume Me, Des Despelote, I think. Lost Records, Bloom and Rage, South of Midnight, and Wanderstop. I don't know any of these games except for South of Midnight. I did play about an hour of South of Midnight, and it seemed fun, so I'm gonna go with South of Midnight on this one. But I really can't say I have a whole lot of experience with them. Let's see. So the next category here is for best ongoing game. So this is going to be a category that, oh, no, wait, there is one that I'm actually familiar with. Well, kinda. Marvel Rivals. Okay, so these are the nominees. So it's Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, Helldivers 2, Marvel Rivals, and No Man's Sky. I played about an hour of Marvel Rivals. I wanted to check it out because I like Marvel, and I was like, "Yeah, let's give it a shot." And it looks kind of fun. It actually I had a fun time with it that little hour that I played of it. But I just not too much into these kind of games. It's not that I couldn't get into them. It's just that I just feel like there'd just be a big drain on my time, and I like playing a variety of games and all. So not really a category that I'm all about, but I'm gonna go with Marvel Rivals just because that was kind of fun that hour that I played of it. Best community support. So Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, Helldivers 2, and No Man's Sky. So this is for recognizing a game for outstanding community support, transparency, and responsiveness, inclusive of social media activity and game updates and patches. I don't really follow like the like on social media, like these companies and all, and like on Discord and things like that. So I really don't have much of a say on this, but I do like some of the things that the director or the main dude on Larian Studios that he said for Baldur's Gate 3, and I like Baldur's Gate 3, so I'm just going to go with that one based on just that right there. Best independent game. So this is for Absolum, which seems to be like a cool like hack and slash rogue game. But Bollocks Pit, Blueprints, Claire Obscure, Expedition 33, Hades 2, or Hollow Knight Silksong. Ah, because Claire Obscure almost doesn't feel like an independent game, but it is. I'm gonna go with Claire Obscure. Yeah. Best debut indie game: Blueprints, Claire Obscure, Les Pelote, or Dispatch. I actually heard Dispatch is kind of cool. I'm gonna go with Claire Obscure. Just sweeping the categories this year. So best mobile game, so I probably won't have much input on this. So Destiny Rising, Persona 5, The Phantom X, Sonic Rumble, Umamumi Pretty Derby, and Wuthering Waves. I don't know. I haven't played these. I'll give it a Sonic just because, Sega. Sega! Best VR and AR game. So Alien, Rogue Insurgent, Arcanage, Ghost Town, Marvel's Deadpool VR, and The Midnight Walk. So I haven't messed around with any of these, but if I could play it, I'd probably go with, well, Alien would be pretty cool too, though, if it's a decent game. But I have seen more gameplay footage of Marvel's Deadpool VR, so I'm going to choose that one just based on that right there, since I don't have any actual real experience with them. Best action game. So Battlefield 6, Doom the Dark Ages, Hades 2, Ninja Gaiden 4, or Shinobi Art of Vengeance. So I played a little bit of Doom the Dark Ages, haven't played the other ones, but I did beat Shinobi Art of Vengeance, and it's a good one. So I'm going to go with that one. Best action adventure game. So Death Stranding 2 On the Beach, Ghost of Yotei, Hollow Knight Silksong, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, or Split Fiction. So the ones that I mainly played, so I played maybe about an hour into Ghost of Yotei, about 2 hours into Hollow Knight Silksong, about 3 to 4 hours into Indiana Jones. I'm gonna go with Hollow Knight Silksong. Best RPG, so that's Avowed, Claire Obscure, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Monster Hunter Wilds, or The Outer Worlds 2. I'm going with Claire Obscure. Best fighting game. So 2XKO. I don't know what that is. Capcom Fighting Collection 2. Fatal Fury City of Wolves. Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection. Or Virtua Fighter 5 Revo World Stage. So I do have the Capcom Fighting Collection 2, which is great because it has like the Capcom versus SNK games along with like the Power Stone, so it's a great compilation. Mortal Kombat, I mean, it's a great collection. I know people seem to have some issues with it as far as like the emulation and all, and I guess I haven't messed around with it too much to really notice it, but it seems like the online element of it's kind of broken. So, but otherwise for me personally, there's still pretty good fighting game compilations. But whenever there's Virtua Fighter 5 on here, even though it's a game that came out many, many years ago, I'm still going to go with that because that to me is still one of the GOAT fighting games of all time. Although actually the Capcom Fighting Collection 2 does have a version of Street Fighter Alpha 3, which is my favorite fighting game of all time. I'm going to go with Virtua Fighter 5 still. Best family game. Donkey Kong Bonanza, Lego Party, Lego Voyagers, Mario Kart World, Sonic Racing Crossroads, or Split Fiction. I feel like Split Fiction because I really like It Takes Two, and my wife and daughter actually really like It Takes Two a lot. So I feel like that one would be it, but we haven't really gotten into that game yet. I really like Donkey Kong Bonanza, but I've been playing them more on my own. But we played some Mario Kart World, and we've had fun with that. So I'm going to go with Mario Kart World on this one. Best Simulation Strategy Game. So this is Final Fantasy Tactics, The Ivalice Chronicles, Jurassic World Evolution 3, Sid Meier's Civilization 7, Tempest Rising, The Altars, and 2 Point Museum. This one's an easy one. Even though I haven't beaten it yet and all, but Final Fantasy Tactics is amazing. So I'm going to keep going with that one. Best sports racing. So I'm not going to have too much input on this one, but let's see. EA Sports FC 26, F1 25, Mario Kart World Rematch, which is like, excuse me, like a kind of like a anime soccer game. I'm not sure what that is. Um, or Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. I'm going to go with Mario Kart World on this one. It's the only one I really have any experience with. Best multiplayer: Arc Raiders, Battlefield 6, Elden Ring Night Rain, Peak, or Split Fiction. I feel like I would really like Split Fiction, so I'm going to go with that one. Best adaptation. So, a Minecraft movie, Devil May Cry, Splinter Cell, Death Watch, The Last of Us Season 2, or Until Dawn. I really don't have any much experience with this. For me, The Last of Us is my second favorite game of all time, so I absolutely love that game. The first season that they did, so the HBO season with Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, it's not bad. It's not bad, I guess. Season two, after about 3 episodes, I really couldn't get into it, so I can't say I'd go for that one. I watched like about 10 minutes of the Minecraft movie, so I don't really know much about that one. I'm gonna go with Devil May Cry, even though I've never seen it, but it looks pretty cool, and I like Dante, and the animation looks pretty sick, so I'm gonna go with Devil May Cry. Most anticipated games. So let's see. So these are for recognizing an announced game that has demonstrably illustrated potential to push the gaming medium forward. So there's 007 First Light, Grand Theft Auto 6, Marvel's Wolverine, Resident Evil Requiem, and The Witcher 4. Uh, they all look good. Grand Theft Auto 6 is kind of the obvious choice. I am looking forward to it and all, but I'm not like the biggest Grand Theft Auto fan. So it's going to come down to Marvel's Wolverine, Resident Evil Requiem, and The Witcher 4 for me. The Witcher 4, I guess I mean, the demo that they showed look amazing, but I guess I need to see more on what exactly they're doing with that. Resident Evil Requiem, I'm sure it'll be great, but I kind of already know what I'm getting with that. Marvel's Wolverine is the one that really has me interested, so I'm going to go with that one. And Content Creator of the Year, let's see. So there's Cadril, K CNET, Moist Critical, Sakura Miko, and the Burnt Peanut. I don't really know much of these. I did watch a few videos of Moist Critical, and I did like some of the takes that he had. So I guess I'll go with him. But I'm not honestly too familiar with a lot of them or any of them except like a handful of videos that I've seen of Moist Critical. Best esports games: Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2, League of Legends, Mobile Legends Bang Bang, Valorant. I'm not familiar with either one of these. I'm just going to pick League of Legends just because I know a few people that like that, and so sure, I'll put in my vote for them. And best EA Sports athlete. I'm not going to know any of these guys, but let's just see here. There's Brock from for Valorant, Chovy from League of Legends, Forsaken for Valorant, Kakaru for Street Fighter, Menard for Street Fighter, and ZY Wu for Counter Strike 2. Street Fighters, I love Street Fighter, so I'm gonna go Meeny Miny Mo. Catches everybody. I'm gonna go with Menard for Street Fighter. I just don't follow that whole scene there. But as best esports team, so Gen G for League of Legends, NRG for Valorant, Team Falcons for Dota 2, Team Liquid for Mobile Legends, and Team Vitality for Counter Strike 2. Again, just because I know a few people that like League of Legends, I'm gonna go with that one there. Okay. And then I guess it just has you notify me when there's round one, round two, and round three. Okay, cool. So, all right. Well, that was fun. So let's see. I'm gonna assume Claire Obscure is gonna really sweep a lot of the awards this year. So we'll see how that all plays out. But all right, let's get into 1995. So 1995 was a big year. because it's one of those transitional years where we're finishing off the previous generation and going into the next generation. So those years, usually there's a lot of content just because there's still a lot of stuff coming out from the previous gen, and then all the hardware and all that coming out for the new gen and all that. So there's going to be probably a lot to talk about here. Although I was going to talk about Chrono Trigger quite a bit, but because that ended up being in one of the Relay of Gamings, I guess I won't talk about it too much here now and all, because I had some things that I wanted to say about that game, obviously, right? And also, spoiler, it's my game of the year for this year, but I'll just basically make a mention of it here and all that and go from there. But yeah, so 1995. So let's first go through these, stats and all that of the year. And the website that I had pulled up on that crash, but there it is. Okay. So 1995. Oh wait, Dragon Quest VI actually did come out in 1995 then. So this would have been in Japan, of course, right? But all right. So 1995 saw many sequels, prequels, and video games such as Dragon Quest VI, Mega Man 7, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, excuse me, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest, and Tekken 2, along with new titles such as Mario Picross, Battle Arena Toshiden, Chrono Trigger, Rayman, Twisted Metal, Star Wars, Dark Forces, Destruction Derby, Wipeout, and Jumping Flash. The year's highest grossing arcade game in Japan was Virtua Fighter 2, while the best-selling arcade video games in the United States were Daytona USA for the second year in a row, and Mortal Kombat 3. The home video game with the highest known sales in 1995 was Dragon Quest VI. Despite only releasing in Japan, the Super Famicom was the best-selling console in Japan, while in North America, Super Nintendo was the best-selling console in North America. So the video game with the highest known sales in 1995 was Dragon Quest VI. Wow. Like I said, like I mentioned earlier, right? Dragon Quest, during this time, so the first 4 Dragon Quest games did come out on the original Nintendo, right? So they were known as Dragon Warrior here. So Dragon Warrior 2, Dragon Warrior 3, Dragon Warrior 4. Dragon Quest, I guess it would have been known Dragon Warrior at the time. And it has something to do with the licensing that something else already had Dragon Quest here in the United States. But basically for Dragon Quest V, that didn't come out here in the States, at least not at this time, because that came out on the Super Nintendo. But it didn't come out here in the States. But that was a huge hit, though, in Japan. And Dragon Quest V, and then Dragon Quest VI, so the one they're talking about here, that one only released in Japan also. But even then, right, like I said, it was selling a lot. And Dragon Quest VI, I've only played maybe an hour into it, as I was just kind of going through the Dragon Quest games. I just wanted to get a feel for them. And it seems cool and all, but it seems to be kind of one of the black sheeps of the Dragon Quest series. But at least at the time, it sold pretty well, it looks like it. So that's cool. So hardware releases. So on March 20th, Game Boy Play It Loud series color versions of the Game Boy came out. So there was a lot of different so Nintendo was doing this Play It Loud thing where they were just their advertisement for a little very 90s colorful and all. And it was sort of it seemed like it was their attempt to try to get one up on Sega, right? Because Sega's advertisements were very loud and all, and so that was sort of their way of trying to compete against them. But on April 23rd, a Satellaview accessory for the Super Famicom console in Japan only came out. So that is my understanding. It's sort of kind of like we talked about the Sega channel. Yeah, I think it's a similar service to that, but for the Super Famicom, and again, only in Japan. The only thing that I really know that came out for that was it's like a remaster of The Legend of Zelda. So I'd almost be interested in trying to get my hands on that somehow. I wonder if you can emulate it somehow. I'll have to look into that. But on July 21st, the Virtual Boy 32-bit console in Japan, and it was discontinued on December 22nd. So I didn't make a note here regarding the Virtual Boy when I was going through this, so I'll just talk about it here really quick. Well, honestly, I don't know a whole lot about it, but basically the Virtual Boy, my understanding is I believe it was developed by Gunpei Yokoi, so he's the dude behind Game Boy and Metroid series. And it was just a bit of a flop. Actually, it was a big flop for Nintendo. It's like this thing where you put, it's like this big, eye kind of thing where you put your face into it and all, where you can see, these images in 3D, and it's all red though. And it supposedly was just really known to give people a lot of headaches and all that. So the technology was cool, the idea was cool. It's just that the actual implementation of it and the way they could market it and all, it just I don't think the market was ready for something like that yet. Because I mean, even to this day, right? Virtual reality is kind of a niche thing still. So you can only imagine back then. Like it's cool in concept, but yeah, it just wasn't a big hit for them. But on May 11th, Sega releases the Sega Saturn in North America, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. The Nintendo Entertainment System, though, is discontinued in North America on August 14th. September 9th, Sony releases the PlayStation in the United States. Again, we'll talk about that more later. And then September 29th, Sony releases the PlayStation in Europe. October 25th, Funtech releases the Super 8-can console in Japan, or I'm sorry, not in Japan, in Taiwan. I have no idea what that is. And let's see, full dates unknown for R-Zone and VXX1 headgear. So I'm not sure what that is. Let's see, but for Game of the Year, looks like kind of a combination between Virtua Fighter 2. So these are just like various magazines and all that, but Virtua Fighter 2, Yoshi's Island, Twisted Metal, and Jumping Flash seem to be some of the names that I'm seeing the most here. Let's see. So the highest grossing arcade games in Japan. So number one was Virtua Fighter 2. Number two was Street Fighter Alpha, or Street Fighter Zero, as it was known over there. Number three, Vampire Hunter Darkstalker's Revenge, also known as Night Warriors. Number four was Tekken. Number five, The King of Fighters 94. Number six, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Number seven, X-Men Children of the Atom. Number eight, Samurai Showdown 2. Number nine, Tekken 2, because I'm assuming Tekken 2 probably came out kind of late this year. And then number 10, Puzzle Bobble. In the United States, let's see, it looks like at the top was Daytona USA, Neo Geo MVS, Mortal Kombat 3, and then also below that, because they just have them all kind of lumped all together, Sega Rally Championship, WWF WrestleMania, Area 51, and then after that, 2-on-2 Open Ice Challenge, Indy 500, Virtua Fighter 2, and Virtual Cop. Best-selling home game consoles. So number one was the Super Nintendo with 3,518,000. Number two was the PlayStation, so at 3,100,000. Number three was Sega Saturn with 2,060,000. Number four with the Sega Genesis was 1,998,000. Number five was the Game Boy with 1 million. Number six was the Panasonic 3DO at 400,000. Number seven was the Nintendo Entertainment System with 184,000. Number eight was the Sega Game Gear at 180,000. Number nine was the Atari Jaguar with 150,000. And number 10 was the PCFX NEC. So NEC, so it was a follow-up to the TurboGrafx. And I don't know a whole lot about the system and all. I just know that it was only in Japan and ultimately kind of flopped. But it looks like it sold just 120,000, and that was just in Japan. So the best-selling home video game was, again, Dragon Quest VI. So Realms of Revelation, I think is what it ended up being called over here. Well, when it finally got ported over here sometime later. But so again, this was only in Japan, and it sold 2,482,600 or 640,000 or 640,000. The number two, it just has three of them lumped together. So this is for Chrono Trigger, which was at 2 million. Super Mario World Yoshi's Island also at 2 million, and Mortal Kombat 3 for the Genesis and Super Nintendo at 2 million. So I don't know if they sold 2 million each or altogether, I'm not sure. But then number five, it has Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest with 1,987,000. Number six was Donkey Kong Country with 1,643,000. And then number seven was Virtua Fighter 2 on the Sega Saturn, made it to a top 10 list. Good job, Saturn. 1,500,000. And then number eight was Derby Stallion 3 on the Super Nintendo with 1,086,000. Number nine was Killer Instinct on the Super Nintendo with 1 million. And number 10 was Tekken on the PlayStation 1 with 942,000. And so in the United States, wait, is it repeating the same thing? Oh, okay, so the first list that I read off was combining Japan and United States. So, okay, I'll just go off of that. Let's see, but for events that happened this year, so in January or February, Stars is released as shareware. No idea what that is. April 6th, Funko Inc., parent company of video game retailer FuncoLand, announces that Vice President and Director Stanley Bodine is promoted to President and Chief Operating Officer, replacing founder David Pomigi, who will remain as Chairman and Chief Executive. Financial Controller Robert Heben is also named Chief Financial Advisor, or Officer, while Vice President of Merchandising and Information Systems Michael Hinnenkamp resigns from the company to pursue other career opportunities. May 11th, introduction to trade magazine Game Week, then called Video Game Advisor. May 11th through 13th, the first annual Electronic Entertainment Expo E3 is held in Los Angeles. Oh yeah, so that's right. So this was the first year for E3. And November 5th, GameFAQs debuts on the web as an archive of video game FAQs. And November 24th, Nintendo unveils a playable version of the Nintendo Ultra 64, later renamed the Nintendo 64, at the 7th Annual Nintendo Space World Software Exhibition in Japan. 13 games were demonstrated, but only 2 were in playable form, which was Kirby Ball 64 and Super Mario 64. New companies that were made this year was BioWare, Frog City, Interworld Productions, Remedy, and Talonsoft. Defunct is Cyber Dreams. Oh, look, another lawsuit from Nintendo. Nintendo versus Samsung Electronics. Nintendo sues Samsung for promoting software piracy. The suit is settled. Nintendo. And then on Nintendo of America versus NTDEC. It doesn't say what that one is for. Yep. Nintendo's going after everyone already going back then. That's funny. But yeah, so E3, yeah, so that was I remember in magazines, they would start showing like, all the journalists that were able to go to E3. And also this started from like 1995 going forward for at least up until like, I don't know, 2000. When did E3 stop becoming like a big deal? I want to say I don't know for sure, but like mid 2010s or so. So there was a good stretch there of a lot of like E3 events and all that. And so I remember I used to look forward to the issues that would come out in magazines, or eventually as YouTube started becoming a thing and all that, right? And I was seeing all the video footage coverage of E3 and all that. Those were exciting times. And so this is when E3 started. But nowadays things have changed and all, it's just the way people can market things and all. I'm sure that a lot of companies save a lot of money by not having to go to a show and building a booth and all that and investing money in that when they can just show off a trailer on YouTube, right? Yeah, times have changed. Times have changed. But let's see, I'm just kind of going through here if there's anything else that I wanted to kind of go in detail before I start going into games and all that. But nope, let's start talking games here. So starting with 16-bit still, right? So again, the the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, they're still alive and kicking, and they had some pretty good software this year. So on the Sega Genesis, wasn't one of its better years, but it had some good stuff. There was a Ristar that came out, and so that's on the Sega Genesis, and it's a very cutesy kind of platformer, a very Sega-like character. It's it must have been a division of Sega that developed it, because it's announced it just has Sega as the publisher and developer for it. But basically you play like the star and you have like these elastic arms, and so those allow you to swing on things and grab enemies and headbutt them and all. But it's a very cutesy game, and it's a lot of fun. The backdrops and everything are very colorful and very whimsical, very much a kid-friendly game, and has some of that famous Genesis garbled voices where the little wristler's like, play with me. It sounds creepy as hell, even though I think they made it to sound kind of cute. But, just the Sega couldn't do the best voices. But the music is actually really good, though. It has like the music, it sounds like they sampled some instruments and all, and it actually sounds pretty clear. But it's a fun game. It's definitely a fun Sega platformer, so worth picking up or playing it somehow. But we also had Comic Zone, which is another popular Sega Genesis game. But I don't know. It's Comic Zone. I love the concept to it. It's where basically you're a comic book artist and you get sucked into your own comic book. And so the way the levels are laid out is that it looks like a comic book page, right? Where it has like all the different, almost looks like a storyboard and all that, right? Where you hop from one screen to, or from one storyboard artwork to another and all. And so it's really clever. I love the idea behind it. It's a very original game and it plays a bit of like a side-scrolling beat 'em up and all, but it's very difficult though. And I have a hard time getting through this game. Back in the day, we used to rent it and I got a little ways into it, but I just always had a hard time with this game. If I were to try to pick this game up and all nowadays as you try to beat it, I'm using the shit out of save states because it's a very difficult game. My brain is just getting a little bit too old to try to, get good. But I love the concept to it, though. That's why I want to see this game to the end at some point because it has an incredible concept again, right? Where you're in this comic book page and all that. I haven't really seen anything too much done in this style, at least in this like a 2D platformer and all. And so for that, I do think it deserves some kudos. But we ended up getting Phantasy Star 4 at the end of the millennium here in the United States. I believe the game came out in the previous year in 1994 in Japan, I believe. But so this game, there was a bit of back and forth, if I recall reading in magazines, if this game was ever going to come out here in the United States, because it was a fairly big game. And so RPGs back then, as they started getting bigger and bigger, because like Final Fantasy 3 and then even Chrono Trigger, I think they were kind of expensive when they came out here because it just looks like back then to localize these games and all, it just cost a lot of money. And they were also fairly big cartridges, right? Like at least 24 plus cartridges, 24 meg, I should say, cartridges. And so Phantasy Star 4, yeah. So if I remember right, I think it was a 24 meg cartridge, and it did finally come out, and it came out at basically $100, so $99.99, I believe. And it came in that flimsy red box that the Genesis games were coming in afterwards with, like, if I recall, I think the manual was Xerox too also. And so, but we did get it over here, and I thought it was pretty cool because, again, it wasn't a game that I was expecting to come out here in the United States because Nintendo was sort of becoming more of the RPG friendly system than the Genesis was. But Phantasy Star 4 was like the big RPG on the Genesis, and some people were saying that it's like Final Fantasy 6 and all, and so I was like, oh shit, if it's that good on the Genesis and it's Phantasy Star that I was already a big fan of, I was excited about it. And so I remember we rented it early 1995, and I did like it. I the music to it is really incredible. The Battlement system is really incredible. The updated look at the Algo Star system was really cool, and so I was liking it. But something about the game though that I don't know, it felt like everything just kind of like I said about Chrono Trigger, where Chrono Trigger moves along at a really brisk pace, right? But it's paced well though. Where Phantasy Star, kind of the same thing. It moves at a really fast pace and all that, so it makes it fun to play. But the story just kind of like moves along, and it doesn't really give you time to like soak in what's going on and all. And it also ends up just kind of feeling more like a MacGuffin quest and all. We're just going to grab one thing to another thing and all that, and not really any major like dramatic plot development on it. Where Chrono Trigger did that a lot better, I feel. But kind of like Chrono Trigger, though, you can do like these dual techs and all that, or triple techs and all, where you have multiple characters doing a certain technique for like major damage output, and so that was a lot of fun and all. But ultimately, when I first played it, I did like it enough that, and because I was such a fan of Phantasy Star 2, that I remember we rented it once, and I really wanted to own this game, but again, it was like $100. And so during the summer of that year of 1995, so I would have been going from a freshman to a sophomore. But during that summer, I got a job working just out in the field, just pulling weeds out of like a alfalfa field. And I was just trying to earn some money just to mainly to buy Phantasy Star 4. And it was funny because I was allergic to like a lot of grass and like weeds and things like that. So during that week that I worked that just to earn some money, I remember my hands got all puffed up and had a bunch of hives on them and all that. And I was like, God, I'm surprised I didn't kill myself doing that. But hey, I got my money to buy Phantasy Star 4. So I ended up buying that game immediately once I got my first paycheck. So I would have been, 15 years old at the time. But yeah, Fantasy Star 4, it's a cool game. Not, I like Fantasy Star 2 honestly more, and even Part 1 more, but it is a great Sega Genesis RPG, and yeah, pretty cool. Snatcher on the Sega CD also, when I was looking this up, it says that it came out in North America in January 1995, but I could swear that I played this game during that Christmas of 1994. That's why I was a little confused on this one. But it came out either or, right? Late 1994, early 1995. And Snatcher on the Sega CD it's an amazing game. It's the first game that I experienced from Hideo Kojima. And it's a very story-based game where you're kind of like a point and click, I guess you can say. You're selecting some options, and so that the story moves forward, right? And it's a cyberpunk setting. So again, I've already talked about I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Has a very much inspired by Blade Runner and Terminator. I mean, Hideo Kojima wears his influences on his sleeves, like his movie influences, but it's still its own thing though, and it's a lot of fun. Going through the mystery of what's going on in this game. A lot of cool twists and turns at the time, really well acted. And the Sega CD version is the only version, as far as I know, that came out in the United States, because it first came out like on a Japanese computer. There was the MSX and I believe another one. But then eventually it got ported to the PC Engine CD, again, only in Japan. But the Sega CD version came out here only in the United States, because it also got a port on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, I think, the following year. But those were also only in Japan. So if you want an English port of Snatcher, which is probably the best version also, Sega CD one's the one to get. Hell expensive if you try to get the physical copy now. I mean, we're probably talking in the thousands of dollars. So this is one that I would say emulate the shit out of, because it's a great experience. I mean, if you like Metal Gear Solid games, or more recently Death Stranding, right? So Death Stranding 2 just got nominated for Game of the Year. So that game, that series, I would assume, has a following to it. And I haven't played the Death Stranding games, but I can imagine it has a lot of that Hideo Kojima quirkiness to it and all. And if you like that style, go back and check out this game, Snatcher, because this is one of his first earlier games. And so you can kind of see where he was already way back then, because Snatcher originally came out in like the 1988-ish or so, I think, originally. But again, the Sega CD version didn't come out until 1994, 1995. But that early on, you can already kind of tell what his style is and everything and all that, which eventually took on that sort of storytelling style to the Metal Gear Solid games, and then eventually the Death Stranding games now. So, yeah, Snatcher, a great game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And it was one of the first games also. So, because we had to play, this was an amazing time, because this is where I was really appreciating the medium of video games as far as storytelling, because we had like Final Fantasy 3, I'm going to call it just Final Fantasy 6. Final Fantasy 6 on the Super Nintendo, 1994. Snatcher, Lunar, which came out in 1993, but I played it around this time. Fantasy Star 4, Chrono Trigger, and these were games that had these massive epic stories to them and all. And that I remember thinking, I was like, this is really good stuff. Like I think I like these stories more than what I would read in a book or in a movie. And so I was really starting to appreciate and seeing the potential for what stories in video games could be. And then let alone that, you have the gameplay element of it and all that, and the visuals and the audio and all. But this is during this time frame where it was really magical for me, and my imagination was just getting very influenced by a lot of the stuff that was coming out during this time. And Snatcher, like I said, right, that was one of those other games that was a big part of that there. But yeah, it's a great game. Definitely check it out if you get a chance. Earthworm Jim 2 also came out this year. Now, this was also on the Super Nintendo, and from what I understand, I think this version they were more similar to each other, where the previous one, the Genesis one, was kind of favored a little bit more, where they gave it that extra level, a little bit more attention to the music. Where this one, I haven't played the Super Nintendo one much, but I believe that they were just more the same. So whichever one really, you'll be fine with. And actually, the Super Nintendo one might have been a little bit better, if I recall. But either way, Earthworm Jim 2, kind of more of the same. It has a lot more varied story or level designs in it. But because of that, I don't quite like this one as much as the first one. I actually did a quick little review on my YouTube Shorts here last week on this game. but it's still a lot of fun. Has a lot of the same silly sense of humor, good gameplay still, and a lot of silly stuff in this game that it's actually hilarious. And but some of the different ways you play some of the stages and all, it can be a little frustrating in some sections. But it's still fun though, and very creative and all that, and definitely worth a shot, right? Um, yeah, you'll have a lot of fun with this game. It's great stuff. And let's see. But going on to the Super Nintendo, so the Super Nintendo had another excellent year. And this year, as I was looking at some of the games that came out, a lot of them are very much what the Super Nintendo did really well, and that is like an RPG kind of games. But let's just go through it, because the Super Nintendo had an excellent year. So we had Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. So it's really more Yoshi's Island Part 1, because, well, I know there was a Yoshi game on the Nintendo, but I don't know if it was this style. But anyway, basically, I think they put the name Super Mario World 2 on it because to try to capitalize on the Super Mario World name. But it's really its own thing, though, with Yoshi Island games, because Yoshi Island games ended up becoming like its own sub-series going forward. It's very much a platformer, though. And so in this game, you control Yoshi or a variety of Yoshis, and you have Baby Mario on your back. And so you're just trying to get through these stages and all to, ultimately get Baby Mario back home. Or honestly, I don't know what the story is. Basically, Baby Mario falls from like a stork or something, some bad guy, the little wizard looking dude, I think, I forgot his name, and he makes his Baby Mario fall, and so then he falls on this island of Yoshis, and so Yoshis are trying to protect him, something like that, more or less what the story is. Doesn't matter what the story is, but it's really fun, and it's a great platformer. It's a very user-friendly platformer. I haven't beaten this game, but I've gone a little ways into it and all. I do recall it's not really much of a challenge, but it's really fun though, and definitely a great game for like to get like if you want to get a kid to play one of the older Mario games. This is one that they could probably have a lot of fun with, especially with the the little Mario gimmick where it's if you get hit, then Mario kind of starts floating up in the air crying. Which can be kind of annoying, honestly, but it's still a lot of fun though, and definitely a family-friendly Mario game. And yeah, I mean, it's still a really excellent platformer though. But speaking of platformers and excellent, we had Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest. So Rare and Nintendo started pumping these games out for the Donkey Kong Country. So we had the Donkey Kong Country last year, and then Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest this year. And for you younger people, this is what I'm talking about here, where sometimes those older people have a little bit of complaints about like the long release times of video games. I mean, I get it. Games nowadays cost more, a lot more goes into games nowadays and all that. But we were getting just, as the kids say nowadays, banger after banger after banger, in the ears, right? I mean, we had Donkey Kong Country, known as one of the best platformers of all time. The following year, Donkey Kong Country 2, one of the even better. And it was just a 1 year wait, right? And then next year we had another Donkey Kong Country game, and so that's what I'm talking about, right? And it's like just then we had Final Fantasy VI last year, Chrono Trigger this year, and then it was just like it was just a great time and all that. And I guess we were a little spoiled back then on just like the quality of games that we were getting and how quickly they were coming out. It was just amazing. But anyways, I'm old man yelling at the clouds now. But Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest. I actually haven't played much of this game, but what I have played of it, it's very similar, but just more of, right, and better in a lot of ways, it looks like, than the first one. And I really enjoyed the first one, right? So if I really like the first one, I can only imagine how much I would like this one. So I'm still kind of working my way through that series along with Donkey Kong Bonanza. So I'm kind of in a Donkey Kong sort of like, that's like my platformers that I'm playing right now. But yeah, great game though, from what it looks like, and probably one of the more popular games this year too as well. But we also had Mega Man X3, so the third installment in this X series. Not too familiar with these games. I know that the first one, Mega Man X, came out, 2 years ago, I believe. So again, another game, right, they're just coming out with, yearly. From what I understand, the Mega Man X games on the Super Nintendo, they're pretty good, but the first one seems to be the more highly regarded one. But we also had Secret of Evermore, which was like an action RPG. But this one, it was from Squaresoft. But if I recall, it was developed by like a North American division that they have over here, that they had over here at the time. And I don't know much about this game and all that, but it seems like it was pretty well done and all. But I just remember that it was done from like a North American side over here, so it has a bit more of an American feel, I guess, to the game than a Japanese feel, from what I recall. But I know that you have like a dog in it and all, and that's about as much as I know. But we had a lot of cool RPGs or action RPG kind of games, though. So there was also Lufia 2. The first one was pretty decent. The second one seems to be pretty decent too. Also, I'm not familiar with the series though. But we also had, I think it's the first Tales game. So nowadays you'll see like Tales of Vespertia, Tales of Berseria, I think just got like some kind of a remaster announced recently. Tales of Exilia, and there's a bunch of Tales games. I think this was the first one, and it was on the Super Nintendo, so Tales of Fantasia. And this one, the graphics were pretty good on it and all, but I remember there was a big talk about this because it was one of the first earlier games where it had like sound in it. You know, because nowadays we're used to like when you're fighting enemies and all you hear a bunch of sound effects or like or voice samples, you know, like your character saying like, yeah, take that and all, kind of cheesy, but you know, something we're used to now. This game was one of the first games that started doing that on cartridge back then. So if I recall right, it was kind of known for that. Paused it there for a little bit. My daughter came in and just wanted to check in on me. And so I told her, I was like, all right, well, I'm finishing up here. And like, you want to just, because I have like the Switch Lite that she has, that I've pretty much given to her. And I was like, you want to play on your Switch? She's like, yeah. I was like, let me see how much battery it has. She's like, and I was like, oh, it looks like it has about 19%. She's like, oh, it doesn't have 6-7 percentage. I was like, get out of here. Oh, that whole 6-7 shit. I don't, yeah. We had our shit though. Also, what was it? The Wolf Pack or the Cornholio? So we had our stupid shit too. So can't really say too much on it and all. But anyways, so Tales of Fantasia, and we also had another really excellent action RPG. At least what I've played of it. I've only played a few hours into it and all, but it's that Terranigma game. So this is a game from Enix, right? I think from Enix, and it was so Enix was like almost like on the par of like Squaresoft as far as like their high quality action RPG or RPG games that they were doing. So because you know Squaresoft had Final Fantasy, but then it had a lot of other games that they were doing too also. And then Enix had like the Dragon Quest series, but then they had a lot of other kind of games that they were doing. And so Terranigma was known as one of the higher quality games that Enix was doing back then. It only came out in Japan and in Europe though, I believe. Because it didn't come out here in the North America, but because it came out in Europe, there was an English version of it. So I can't think of another way of how you can play this game outside of emulation. But if you do get an emulated version of it, just know that it is in English too. And so what I've played of it, I mean, it seems like a really excellent action RPG. Stunning graphics in it. I haven't gone too deep into like the gameplay of it to really know what it's about, but the graphics and like the story, or at least the story concept of it, where it seems like you're going through like the creation of the world or something like that. I don't know. It sounds interesting, and the music too also is very beautiful. So yeah, definitely worth checking out on this one here. I would say just even from that little bit that I've played, I can already recommend the game. So good stuff. And then we also had kind of like a fan favorite game is Earthbound. There goes my microphone. Oh yeah, I'm all kinds of professional here. But Earthbound, it's I mean, this game came out like around the time that Chrono Trigger came out, so I could be wrong on this. Again, I wasn't, I was playing the Super Nintendo, but it wasn't like the system that I had. So someone correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody's actually even listening to this. But so because Chrono Trigger came out around the same time, I want to say that Earthbound was kind of overlooked at this time. But eventually Earthbound got a really big cult following. And I know that to get like a physical copy of Earthbound, it's known to be one of the more expensive Super Nintendo games, if I'm right on that. But the game is very beloved now. And basically, in Earthbound, it's like a sequel of some sort. This series, it's like a series. I think it's called Mother in Japan, but it's and then I know there was a Game Boy Advance one that came out later, but I could be wrong. But I think this is the no. There was the one on the Nintendo. I think originally did come out here in the States too, but this one did come out in the States, and it's a fun RPG. It's kind of like in the vein of like Goonies, or I guess nowadays like Stranger Things and all, where you're like these kids and you're off on an adventure in a more present time setting. You're off on an adventure of some sort against like some alien or supernatural things that are after you and all. But it's like a turn-based RPG, and but it's known to have like kind of a funny, whimsical, down to earth sort of story to it, as far as like, again, because it's more set in the present time. And but yeah, it seems like this game was just really beloved by people that eventually ended up playing it. I've played a bit into it and all, and it does seem fun. I can see the appeal to this game, and I can see myself getting into it because I'm a big fan of like those kind of movies back then. Like Goonies or Monster Squad, or things along those lines. I'm kind of getting into Stranger Things too, also. So very much has that sort of vibe to it, but it seems like there's like some kind of an alien invasion in this game or something to that effect. But the graphics look interesting in it and all. It very much goes with the tone of the game, um, and it's a very beloved game by a lot of people. And I a little bit that I've played, I can kind of see why. But again, at the time when this came out, I think it got a little overlooked, right? And all, because again, it was a RPG coming a little late into the Super Nintendo's lifetime, and then you had like a game like Chrono Trigger and all, right? That might have overshadowed it a little bit. I don't know, but either way, though, it's become highly popular now, so definitely worth checking out. Um, but speaking of Chrono Trigger, so I'm not gonna go too deep into it here because again, I already talked about this game a bit, but absolute amazing game. Came out around mid 1995, I think, somewhere around there. One of the best Super Nintendo games of all time, one of the best RPGs of all time, and just one of the best games of all time. Just an absolute classic. And again, I'll recommend it again. If you haven't played it for whatever reason, go out and check it out. We are actually in its 30th anniversary this year. We were hoping that there'd be some kind of an announcement of some kind of re-release of this game of some sort. We're getting kind of late into the year and we haven't really heard anything about that. So I guess, we'll just have to keep waiting. I mean, I just wish that they would release this game on a more modern console, because again, you can get it like on the Android store, you can get it on Steam, you can get it on the Apple store, but they're not like the best versions of that game. And so then the ones that are considered like the best versions is the one on the Nintendo DS, but that system's already, long and gone. So unless you had if you still have a working DS still and you want to go out and buy a physical copy, which is kind of expensive, and same thing with the Super Nintendo version. So obviously there's always emulation, right? But I just really wish that they would re-release this game, even if you're not going to do like a remaster or remake. And I don't even know if I would want them to do one. I just wish that they would just release the game. Just clean it up a little bit, maybe add a few quality of life, and that's really all I'm asking for. That's it. But they won't do it for whatever reason. I think it's like they're scared to touch this game because it is so beloved by a lot of fans that if they mess it up in any way, I can only imagine the backlash that they would get. So maybe that's a part of it. But it could also be the licensing also, now that I think about it, because again, you had Hironobu Sakaguchi, Yuji Horii, and Akira Toriyama behind it. So I don't know if there's, and especially unfortunately with Akira Toriyama's passing, I don't know if that affects anything like with the licensing, maybe his estate and all that. I'm just speculating there. I don't know, but maybe that has a part to do with it too. But either way, I just wish they would do something with this game. But if not, like I said, there's always selling the high seas. But yeah, and so then let's move on a little bit now more to the newer stuff here that was coming out. So we had Mortal Kombat 3 in the arcades. So this started becoming a thing, and Mortal Kombat 3 started changing up the formula a bit. more or less the same kind of gameplay and all that with the digitized characters, same punch and kick styles, and the way you do your moves and all that. You have your fatalities and all those moves, but it did add a run button and also some combos that you can do, and so that added a new element to the gameplay. And so the setting now, where the first one took place on Earth, the second one took place on Outworld or Netherworld or whatever it's called. And then the third one comes back to Earth, but also where Outworld comes to Earth also. So it kind of combines one and two as far as the setting goes. And it was fun. I don't know. I don't know. I guess the reception of this game, I guess I don't know. I knew part one and two were really highly regarded. Part three, I kind of want to feel like I don't think I read as many good things about it as back then, but they were. I do recall that I don't know if they came out this year for the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, but Mortal Kombat 3 they had ports that came out on those systems there, and on both versions I've actually played them, and they're both not that bad. I would probably go with the Super Nintendo one because the color looks it doesn't look as grainy. Because on the Genesis the backgrounds and all that because it didn't have as much color. It looks a little bit grainy and all that. But other than that, though, I mean, they were both really good ports, though, of Mortal Kombat 3, all things considered, right? Eventually, Mortal Kombat 3 did get a port on the PlayStation, but I'll talk about that here in a bit. But yeah, it was pretty popular in the arcades, all things considered, and was moving along the Mortal Kombat hype train, right? That was still going. And another thing that helped that out was that this is also the year that the movie Mortal Kombat came out. So video game adaptations, unfortunately, have suffered a lot, throughout the years, even to this day, where video games is just a very different medium than movies. And so it's been difficult for a lot of companies to emulate that same sort of feel, right? I mean, there's been some successes that I actually haven't minded. Like more recently, like the Super Mario movie, it's fun, it's nothing special, but I mean, it's like I put it up there on par with like some of the better like Disney animated or Pixar animated cartoons, give or take, right? But again, they're fun, but for me personally, nothing too spectacular. Sonic one and the Sonic the Hedgehog movie 1 and 2, they're fun. They're pretty cool. I haven't seen the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 yet. I have it. I just haven't gone around to seeing it, but they all seem fun. Um, I mean, there was The Last of Us that was pretty okay. But basically, long story short, video game adaptations to movies or shows haven't fared the best. But to this day, I still feel that Mortal Kombat, the movie that came out in 1995, is still probably one of the best movie movies that was adapted from a video game. And it's not like it's like Oscar worthy or anything like that. By no, God no. But I mean, the acting is super cheesy on it, and all that, and it's PG-13. So like, some of the fatalities and the violence and all, they had to really tone down on it and all. But what you do get though is just a fun karate movie that's silly, and I know that's kind of the wrong tone, but at the same time, a lot of the silliness from it comes from Johnny Cage, and Johnny Cage is, in the game also, he's kind of a smartass. But what you do get though is some kick-ass karate action in it. The fight between Liu Kang and Reptile is still one of my favorite fights in a movie of all time. You get an awesome soundtrack. I mean, the soundtrack was just excellent. Had a lot of like modern techno music from that day, and it's just a fun watch. It's super cheesy, but it's a fun watch. And so for what it is, it's still probably one of my favorite video game movie adaptations. And yeah, they came out in 1995. So if you haven't seen it for some reason, just check it out. It's a fun watch, Just after that, though, because there was Mortal Kombat 2 Annihilation that came out, and that one's a bit of a travesty. It's that one's bad. It's I even for someone like me that I can try to appreciate it because of the IP and all. Oh, that one's pretty bad. It has a kick-ass soundtrack though, and it has some good fight scenes in it. But yeah, otherwise it's not that. Maybe don't watch that one. But the first one though, I feel like you'll still get some kind of enjoyment out of it. Just prepare for some '90s acting cheesiness in it. Um, but yeah, Mortal Kombat. So it has some pretty big things that happened this year in it. But also too, so the Sega 32X, I'll talk about a bit about this. So the Sega 32X came out late last year in 1994. It had a decent launch, like at the very initially, but after that, it started phasing out real quick. And so what I understand, a lot of the games that they had planned for it, like I think there was an early concept of a Castlevania game that would end up becoming Symphony of the Night later. But if I recall right, what I read, it started on this system here, and I think it was called like the Bloodletting or something like that. But yeah, the original concept, or some original concept of that game, started on the 32X, but ultimately, obviously, it never finished. There was also like a Golden Axe port I think that I was going to get. And so there were some things that Sega wanted to do with the system, but I think that they saw pretty early on that it was phasing out really quick because I think it's probably been the fastest that I've ever seen a system phase out. Because again, it came out in, oh, let's see, what did I say last year, November of 1994, something like that. But like mid 1995, I mean, it was already pretty much done. Um, I remember there was a port of Virtual Fighter, which is actually a pretty decent port, and they had Virtual Racing too, also, which was a decent port. It had the Space Harrier, which is a pretty decent port, also Afterburner, also had like NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat 2, which are okay ports also on it, but nothing really that showed off like the power of the 32X. And I think that was part of the problem right there. And then also just the output of games also, right? Sega just kind of dropped it. And also, because again, it's like, well, why am I going to get this when the Sega Saturn is coming around the corner? Because again, the Sega Saturn came out earlier than expected, and I'll get into that here in a bit. But it's like, why get the 32X? And so, yeah, I mean, when I've gotten it back and played it on, through emulation, I mean, out of like the three early, more mainstream 32-bit systems that came out, so that would have been the 3DO, the Jaguar, and the 32X. I probably prefer the 32X, honestly, just because of the Sega games that were on there. So again, those games that I just mentioned, and then you had a decent port of Doom. There was a Knuckles Chaotic game, which is kind of like a Sonic game. It plays a bit differently and all, but it's in that universe, right? Of you play as Knuckle and some of other Sonic characters, which is not half bad. And so, I mean, I guess for that I would choose the 32X, but I mean that's it's pretty forgettable. Well, I don't want to say forgettable. I mean, I think that it was an interesting concept. It's just wrong time, wrong strategy, and just it was one of the things that Sega ended up doing that really started leading to its downfall, right? And we'll get more into that as the years come out and all that, right? And all, because again, at this time, unless you were in the business world and all, you didn't really know that, right? You're like, oh, Sega's coming out with a system, but they're coming out with a 32-bit system. Well, that's kind of weird, but we just didn't know at that time how it was going to all play out. But yeah, the 32X, I mean, they ended up dropping the price on it pretty quickly. And because I think it started at 150 and it dropped down to like $99 pretty quick. They canceled a lot of games that were going to be on it. And yeah, I mean, not even an year really that it had any kind of like market relevant to it. But yeah, I mean, because in concept, I mean, it's an interesting idea. Just didn't really do much with it. Because again, right, this is the year where the 32-bit systems, two of the main players in the 5th generation came out in North America this year. So the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation. And again, they came out late last year. So let's back up a little bit so I can set the stage for what ended up happening this year. So late last year, they came out, and so the Sega Saturn outsold the Sony PlayStation late at the end of 1994 in Japan. A lot of that had to do with Virtual Fighter being a pack-in title for the Sega Saturn. So, what I understand of this from things that I've read and all that is so this is where there was even more of a big disconnect here between Sega of America and Sega of Japan. Both sides, I mean, there's more information that has come out from the Sega of America side. Tom Kalinske and a lot of the people involved back then, like Al Nielsen and some other people, right, that were involved with Sega, they've just been more vocal about what's happened. We don't know too much about the Japanese side of it, but from what it sounds like, there was just a bit of a disconnect between the two regions, and so Sony So the Sony PlayStation had announced that they were going to come out here in the United States in September, and same thing with the Sega Saturn. I think it was called Saturn Tuesday. Am I wrong on that? I don't know. Or am I thinking of Sonic Tuesday? I don't know. But basically, they were both going to come out in September. But the Sega Saturn. Now, there's a lot of different versions that I've heard of this and all that, so I might get some of my facts wrong here. But now, this didn't all happen in 1995, right? But let's say, like in the years leading up to the development of the system, because again, there's a lot of work that gets done on these systems before they actually come out, like years before, right? And not only when the systems come out, but also what they're hearing about the other their competitors coming out with. So the Sega Saturn was originally going to be more of a 2D powerhouse of a system that was more like sprite scaling and all that and can do really good 2D. So something along the lines of like, where it was able to do like, let's say arcade perfect ports of like the super scalar games like Outrun, Afterburner and Space Harrier, where it could do like that level of quality of graphics. Not so much like polygons though, but it could do like really good 2D also. Because Sega thought that that was still kind of the future, right, of video games, at least up until that point. But as systems like once they started getting word of like what the Sony was going to do, and apparently the Atari Jaguar, and probably the 3DO to an extent, and maybe even Project Reality as it was known back then, Sega started looking at it and say like, oh wow, actually we probably 3D is coming up a lot faster than they thought. So they they decided to add like another chip into the Sega Saturn that could do more 3D. The problem, though, and again, I've heard a lot of different versions of this, but basically it made the Saturn more harder to program for, though, because yeah, you add this extra chip, which could, that added 3D, that can give you more 3D graphics on it, but you're adding it late to the game because again, a lot of these developers get their testing kits and all that early on. And so then if you're adding a new chip and all that, now it's like they got to relearn things and all that. And then it was kind of hard to program for. Basically the Sega Saturn has been notorious for being one of the more difficult systems to program for. And even nowadays to emulate on the Sega Saturn, I mean, nowadays if you have like a decent emulation device and all that, it's going to do pretty good. But it took a while. I mean, you can emulate games from the Dreamcast a lot better and earlier on than the Sega Saturn. So kind of, and again, I don't know how that works on an emulation side of it, but just to kind of give you an idea of how difficult the system was to program for. And so, because basically it added this extra 3D chip on a system that was mainly more known for doing 2D. And so on paper, from what I've seen, and I understand, the Sega Saturn was technically, I guess, better in certain ways than the Sony PlayStation, but because the PlayStation was easier to program for, though, and it was easier to take advantage of the graphical tools that it had, games ended up looking better on the PlayStation for the most part. So anyway, so the making of the system of the Sega Saturn was a bit of a nightmare from what I understand, and so then again, right, Sega of Japan was noticing that these systems that were coming out were going to be very heavily focused on 3D, specifically the PlayStation. And so they kind of worried a bit. So they added, not at the last minute, but a bit early on, right, enough to add this extra 3D chip on the Sega Saturn. And as the Sony PlayStation looks like it was getting some good word of mouth in Japan towards the end of 1994 and then early 1995, it looks like Sega of Japan started kind of freaking out a little bit. So so instead of launching the system in September of 1995, they pushed it to May of 1995. From what I understand, or at least again, this is coming from the Sega of America side of it, from Tom Kalinske, who's been a bit vocal on this. It looked like he was against it because he was like, if we do this, we're going to kind of screw over the retailers and all that, and it's not going to go very well because we don't have a whole lot of games available for it either and all that. But Sega of Japan was apparently like, nope, just push it through, in a surprise, almost like they almost shadow dropped it. So so I think it was during the E3, was it E3 that they came out and announced that so that the Sega Saturn, right, was going to come out, or they were making their presentation about it, and then after that they said something like, okay, and it comes out the next day, something like that, to that effect. And so it was a bit of a surprise launch and all, but from what I understand is that they only were able to get it out at certain retailers, and like Walmart, for example, didn't get any. So they were a bit upset about that. So much so, was it Walmart or was it KB KB Toy Store? One or the other. Basically, it was a big retailer that ultimately they didn't get any shipments of it. And because I guess even the retailers were surprised, like, oh shit, you're just dropping a whole bunch of Saturns, out for sale. And so it upset a lot of retailers basically, and they didn't have a whole lot of gains for it and all. And so the Sega, it kind of made a mistake in that way, right? Now, at the time, me personally, I was kind of excited for it, and the games that came out at launch were pretty exciting to me because I mean, we had like there was games like, I mean, there was Virtua Fighter, Daytona USA, Panzer Dragoon, I believe, a stall, I think, maybe a stall not, maybe, oh, excuse me, maybe that came out a little bit afterwards. But just with Panzer Dragoon, Daytona USA, and Virtua Fighter, that was already enough to entice me, anyways. But again, just what was happening behind the scenes, it was not good. Um, what ended up happening though, and again, I think this is all during E3, is that so Sega Saturn made their announcement, right, and all, and then also that the price was good, that it was coming out early, and that it was going to be $399 for the system. So basically $400, little on the pricey side. And so Sega of America they did their presentation at E3 and all that. Well, what ended up happening is probably one of the most infamous moments in video game history as far as like what happened in real time, like in real life, basically, is that so there was so during the stretch of Sega of America, I mean Sega of America, whatever, during the stretch of the Sega Genesis's lifetime, right? So Tom Kalinske and his team, they were very aggressively marketing the Sega Genesis, which is what helped them get almost to that they almost beat the Super Nintendo, and that was a big feat, right? To do, and a lot of it had to do with just their marketing strategies and all that. Again, I highly recommend you read that book, Console Wars, if you have any interest in that stuff. But one of the key figures that helped Sega during this time was this dude named Steve Race. Steve Race, right? Is his name, I believe. Yeah, Steve Race. So but he ended up going to Sony, and so a little bit, I don't know, sometime in 1994, maybe it would be my guess. I don't know. So anyway, so Sega Saturn, or the Sega does their presentation. After that, it's Sony's turn. So then one of the main head honchos of Sony is doing his presentation on the PlayStation, Olaf Olafsson, I believe. And so he's, talking about the system. And then he's like, okay, so now I want to introduce Steve Race to talk a little bit more about this. What I understand is that Steve Race had like this whole thing planned out on how he was going to present the PlayStation and all that. And so Steve Race, from what I understand, he was known to be a bit of an aggressive negotiator or a salesman, or, and all that. But instead of doing his whole presentation that he was going to do, he just goes up on stage here at this E3 event, and he just simply said on the microphone to a crowd of people, $299, and then walked off. And the whole crowd just cheered, right? And that right there was like nailing that, driving a nail into that coffin for Sega, right? Because with that simple number right there, basically stating, because Sega had this whole presentation, we're coming out early with the system and all that. It's going to be at $399. All Steve Race had to do, and again, because the PlayStation was already building momentum, would just say $299. It's going to come out at $100 cheaper. You guys have already seen the graphics and all that. I don't need to say anymore. And the room just blew up with cheers and applause and all that, and it was one of the most Sega. I mean, they got so embarrassed there and all, and they got owned basically. And that was kind of the start of how Sony ended up taking over the video game industry. It was really from that moment going forward. And it became a very legendary moment. And so again, because the Sega came out in May, and so it had June, July, August, September. So about a 4-month lead on the PlayStation, because again, that wouldn't still come out in September. And even then, pretty quickly on, the Sony PlayStation already started outselling the Sega Saturn, even when the Sega Saturn had that 4 month lead up on it. And I mean, during the first year, they both had decent launches, at least for games that I'm interested in and all. But really, I mean, the PlayStation just had the games that were just more appealing. Seeing these games in 3D was a big deal also back then. I mean, even if you go back and look at the games now, they look a bit rough, but back then it was just amazing, right? And all because we were so used to 2D games and things like the Atari Jaguar and the 3DO and even the 32X, they didn't really make that much of a they didn't really break into the market that well, but the Sony PlayStation was, and a lot of that probably has to do with because Sony was already a very popular electronics company, so they probably had a lot of connections as far as within the entertainment industry that they were able to use a lot of those connections to bring on companies like Psygnosis, Namco. They got the exclusive rights to Mortal Kombat 3, at least for a period of time. And so they had pretty much an arcade perfect port ready of Mortal Kombat. And then with a lot of the Namco games too, also like Tekken and Ridge Racer were a big deal. And so, the other thing with the Sega Saturn was so you had the like the main games that came out originally for the Sega Saturn, right? So Virtua Fighter and Daytona USA. So again, 3D all of a sudden was like the next big thing, right? Because now it's out in the mainstream. Again, the 3DO and the Jaguar couldn't quite break the market like the way these systems could. And so now everyone was seeing what could be done at home, right, for graphics. Because again, graphics aren't everything, but at this time, because the technology was advancing so quickly, it was appealing to a lot of people. And so what people were seeing was, okay, we got Virtua Fighter and Daytona USA and the Saturn. Virtua Fighter's a little glitchy. Daytona USA, I mean, it plays really well. It did play well, but the graphics were a little choppy. The draw in distance was horrible. And so but then you go over on the PlayStation side and you had Tekken, which looked more impressive than, say, the Virtua Fighter port on the Sega Saturn. And then Ridge Racer, which looked really good. I mean, pretty, not quite as the arcade, because the arcade ran at 60 frames, the PlayStation only at 30, or at least 30. And it just looked a lot better. And so, and again, that's just one example there, right? And so then a lot of the other things that the PlayStation started coming out with. So again, you had a perfect port of Mortal Kombat. You had NBA Jam, which I believe that came out on the Saturn too also, but you had NBA Jam, which was a popular game. I believe NFL Game Day came out too also on the PlayStation. So you had a football game, which is a big deal here in the United States, ready to go. I believe, yeah, I believe it came out. I could be wrong on that, but I want to say I think it did. And you had a lot of other games too also that were showing off what 3D could be. Now, a lot of these games ultimately didn't end up being that great, but like in the long run, but at the time they were really popular. So like Twisted Metal, Wipeout, Battle Arena Tushiden, Demolition Destruction, I think is what it's called. Um, and all of these games, I mean, again, they were really showing off what 3D could be. Warhawk, that was another game, Warhawk. And so everyone was like, oh, wow, look at these 3D graphics, right? And it was just getting the more appealing titles than, what the Sega Saturn could do. And even though, honestly, when I think about that launch here, I prefer more games that came out on the Saturn because Panzer Dragoon, Virtua Fighter, Daytona USA, Astal, Shinobi Legions, just with those games right there, I probably prefer the lineup over the Sega Saturn. But again, I'm thinking of in that moment, at that time, what people were seeing. People were just more impressed with the 3D graphics on the PlayStation. Ace Combat, that's another one that came out pretty early on the Sony PlayStation side. And so the PlayStation just started taking a very early lead, and I mean, I do feel a lot of it was just the games that they were getting, and again, I can't stress enough again, right, on how appealing seeing those 3D graphics that you can get something like that at home must have really lured in a lot of like casual people, right? Um, I remember people buying the PlayStation that weren't even video gamers players back then. It's just because it was just like, I can have this at home. Wow, this looks cool, you know. And yeah, I mean, the Sony PlayStation blew up, and it changed the video game industry almost overnight. Because here was a company that's coming into. Oh, sorry, maybe a little audio glitch there. But here was a video game company that was, or a company, an electronic company coming into the video game realm, but it's bringing in a lot of mainstream appeal. And because of that, it changed the industry a lot. Video games all of a sudden started becoming cool. They started becoming, fascinating. The technology behind it, like, wow, look at this, and um, where Sega and Nintendo were just video game companies. That's all they were. And now we're getting to, we ended up going in a different route here. And I mean, the PlayStation became the first system, I believe, that sold over, I know it sold over 1 million. I don't know if it was the first one that did, but I think it was, that sold over 1 million systems. I mean, up to that point, I know the Game Boy did really well too, also, right? But like a home console, the Super Nintendo maybe that sold like within like no, the original Nintendo, which ended up selling like 50 million or so, and the PlayStation like doubled that basically, give or take, right? Those are rough estimates there from what I can recall in the back of my mind, and so obviously things had changed, right? And we just never really went back. And I say that for better or worse, because again, it's there was just certain things that were happening that eventually I feel still led to today. Where I mean, obviously, it was cool that that video games became very mainstream because it was reaching a broader audience and all that, and so that just opened up a lot of different avenues, right, and on how games are made and all. But also because of that, I feel like we lost a bit of that video game charm that was from back then, and all in the, the pre fifth generation times. So everything that I've talked about in my previous podcasts on this, going forward, things changed. And there's a certain charm that was lost from the years prior that, and again, not to say that it was for the worse. I mean, we ended up getting amazing stuff afterwards, but there was something that was just, it almost like, I don't know, it's going to be a weird way to put it, but it's almost like video games lost their innocence, and it just became something different. It became something very mainstream. It became something very corporatized and all that. But again, not to say that we didn't get any amazing stuff, as you'll see as I talk about the later years and all, but it definitely changed, and it seemed like it just changed overnight. And I can't, I'd be denying it if I said that during this time, how excited I was for the potential of what video games had. And this year, right, as we're seeing these early 3D games and all that, but made by companies that are, pretty big time, it was, I'm looking at games like, Virtua Fighter, Panzer Dragoon, Twisted Metal, Wipeout, and all, and even 2D games like a Stall. And I'm thinking, like, what are games gonna be like if this early on these things look this amazing? And oh, if I only knew back then, right? Eventually, what we would get, but it was an exciting time for sure. We also had like Jumping Flash, which was like, I don't think it was maybe like technically the first 3D platformer, but I would say it'd probably be the first more mainstreamish 3D platformer, where you play like this mechanical rabbit kind of in first person jumping on things and all that. And again, it just kind of started opening up the idea of like a 3D space, because that was mind blowing back then, right? And just playing these games in a 3D space and all that just really opened up a lot of different avenues, right? And all, but, yeah, it was very exciting time and all. And I did want to end on this last little note here. I wasn't quite sure when this happened, but it looks like it did happen in this year. So from what I've seen, so going back, right, and all, Final Fantasy VI, right, was just an amazing game that I played on the Super Nintendo. And again, and then we're getting into 1995, and so I'm seeing all these cool like 3D graphics and all that, at least again for the time, right? And so I was very excited for where video games were heading. Something that I saw towards the end of this year is what really like got me super excited, and eventually the payoff to it was the best experience I've ever had with video games. So I'm going to start now with what happened, but I'm not going to actually finish what the end product ended up being until a later year. But basically, so it looks like this was in, so I'm looking this up here. So it looks like it was in August of 1995. I didn't find out about this though until around October of 1995. So a few months afterwards when I started seeing it in magazines, because it was Game Fan magazine of October 1995 that I saw this, but it looks like the event that this happened in was in August of 1995. So I'm just going to kind of read through here and all that because I want to document this because this became a very special moment for me in video games, and then ultimately what the payoff was on it. So in August of 1995, one of the U.S. Largest CG conventions, SIGGRAPH, was held in Los Angeles. At that time, we were not sure what the next generation RPG game should look like. So as an experiment, we created a CG-based game-like interactive demo to be presented at that show. Now, this is a quote, right, that I'm reading here. It focused on battle scenes that were 100% real-time and polygon-based. So this is from Hironobu Sakaguchi. So this is in an interview he did on a PlayStation Underground #2 demo disc. So Final Fantasy VI, the interactive CG game, also known as the Final Fantasy CGI demo, was a short demonstration produced by Square using characters and settings from Final Fantasy VI. Produced using the new Silicon Graphics Inc. CGI, Onyx, and Indy 2 workstations acquired by Square. 3D models were made in Alias Power Animator and animated in Soft Image 3D, running at 15 frames per second. The demo was Square's first foray into real-time 3D graphics, and many assumed it was a precursor to a new Final Fantasy title for the Nintendo 64 video game console. So again, Nintendo 64, we were already getting 32-bit systems that were coming out right on, and then they were starting to talk more about the Project Reality / Ultra 64 / N64 at that time, which also utilized CGI hardware. Square, however, had not yet committed to Nintendo's console at the time of the demo's production, and much of the technology demonstrated in the demo was later put in use to the rendering of full motion video sequences for Final Fantasy VII, subsequent games for the PlayStation. The Final Fantasy VI CG demo made for the SIGGRAPH exhibition took 20 megabytes. The developers thought the demo had visual impact, and there wasn't a question about which hardware Square would use in the future to realize the promise of the demo. Nothing but the CD-ROM format would suffice. So this is a quote from Hironobu Sakaguchi. So after Final Fantasy VI was completed, the staff had some free time. We then started thinking about what new hardware there was and what we wanted to do with our new creations, and we created a movie as an experiment. At that time, we were working on the CG1 workstations, which had rendering software designed for next-generation hardware. For that reason, we thought it would be good if we could continue using this setup for our next game. With the CGI or CG1 software, we could develop graphics for any hardware. However, for our purposes, we didn't want the frame-by-frame slow rendering that takes many hours. We wanted to develop a new way to render the visuals in real time for our new game. Let's see. So again, that was a quote from Hironobu Sakaguchi. So the demo featured Tara Branford with blonde hair fighting with a short sword, Locke Cole with darker hair fighting with a whip, and Shadow fighting barehanded in a series of battles. So again, those three characters were from Final Fantasy VI. The game is controlled largely through mouse cursor movements. For example, moving the cursor in the shape of a star would summon a dragon, Bahamut, to attack. The general gameplay, including the use of camera angles, timing, and animation, closely resembled that of Final Fantasy VII, and thus represented an artifact of the transition between the 2D and 3D eras of the Final Fantasy franchise. Video footage of this demo is included in the making section of Final Fantasy VII Perfect Guide as an early work on Final Fantasy VII. So, okay, so we didn't, I mean, we were assuming that this was going to be Final Fantasy VII, right? For the Nintendo 64. There's a lot of stuff that happened behind the scenes. I'm gonna devote a bit of time to for the release of when the game comes out. So this will be in 1997. Where I'm gonna try to dedicate some time to this game. Not only because of my own personal bias, just big, but I really feel it was another huge moment that impacted the video game industry. But basically, what happened with this game, because this was the very first app of what we're seeing of what Final Fantasy VII would become, and spoiler alert, as I've already said, right? Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time, but it was also a monumental release for the video game industry on how it changed a lot of things too, along with everything that I'm talking about the PlayStation as well, that it really blew things up. And so I remember at the time when I was watching screenshots of this demo in GameFan magazine. So this would have been in October 1995 magazine. I mean, because I was thinking already, right? I was looking at the graphics of like Virtua Fighter and Tekken and all, and I know they look kind of crude nowadays, but I'm thinking, what is like adventure games going to look like? What is, this going to look like? And then I see this demo that they were showing off here. And so basically in the demo, they're attacking like this kind of like a big old stone golem, and he's in front of like what looks like a castle, but the backdrop is very with dark skies and everything and all. And you see those three characters from Final Fantasy VI, and so they're attacking this golem, and then it ends where I believe it's Terra, where she summons Bahamut from the sky, and it comes down, and it shoots it's like a fireball at the golem and all, and flies away. I remember looking at the screenshots of that and the way they were describing it, and I was just absolutely floored by what they were trying to accomplish. And eventually, when I saw the video of 8 years later, it is pretty stunning if you think about it, what was being done back then. So my imagination just like immensely grew. Like I leveled up as far as like what I could think of what it could look like. And just thinking that I would be able to control it and all that. I mean, it sounded amazing. And so at that time, I remember thinking, I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to get a Nintendo 64. But obviously, well, things change, and I'll get into that more in the next years. But I wanted to leave it off with that and all, just because for this year, because I do recall that this was something that it was just so mind blowing what I was thinking of what was gonna be the future of video games. And eventually, like I said, right, Final Fantasy VII ended up being my favorite game of all time. So I just want to try to build up the hype a little bit for what we were experiencing back then, and then eventually what we got. So that'll be kind of within the next 2 years or so, as I'll talk about that. But yeah, it was an amazing time and all that, for as we were trying to realize the potential of where we were heading in this industry. So it was pretty exciting times. But that's what I got for 1995. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and hope you have an excellent week. Have an amazing Thanksgiving. Wish you all the best health and fun times, and enjoy your times with your family and friends and all, or however you choose to spend it. Don't overeat like I've done before in the past. Yeah. Enjoy your week and have a great one. And we'll see you next week when we talk about 1996. Till the next.